Hey guys, tonight we slow everything down and slip into the softest kind of history. The kind lit by oil lamps, cooled by river air, and paced by stars that do not care what your inbox thinks. Picture it in the present tense. You're looking down from very high up, and the land is mostly dark, except for a few warm pools of firelight. Tiny ancient neighborhoods. A dock by a quiet river. A kiln that's finally stopped roaring. The night holds everything like a blanket, and the people below it are moving through their last small tasks, as if the world has always been this calm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough to type, post your location and your local time in the comments. It's oddly calming to know someone else is listening under a different patch of sky, as if the planet is stitched together by small, quiet moments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying there, and the modern world keeps tapping you on the shoulder like an overeager coworker who just has one quick thing. One more task, one more worry, one more thought you can't solve. At 2 a.m., ancient civilizations pull your attention into a slower scale. They remind you that people have always been people, just with fewer screens and a lot more respect for the nearest river. Start with a map, but not the loud political kind. Your map is made of textures and needs. Dry dust, dark mud, salt air, mountain cold. Places become what they offer. Floodplains where grain can be stored, coasts where boats can travel, valleys where stone can be shaped. You aren't tracking borders, you're tracking habits, where humans learn to stay, to count, to cooperate long enough to build something that outlasts an afternoon. The first relaxing fact is almost too simple. Civilization begins with someone deciding to wait. You plant and you wait. You store and you wait. You build a wall, then you wait to see if it holds. Waiting forces you to notice patterns. The wind shifts before storm. The river rises at a certain time. The stars return to familiar positions, like quiet promises kept without applause. Once people notice patterns, they turn them into routines, because routines are how you make uncertainty feel smaller. Even the busiest ancient settlement had a nightly hush, because darkness was not optional. Light had to be made by hand. A small flame in a shallow lamp wasn't decoration, it was a choice. Picture an evening in a dense neighborhood. The streets are narrow, partly because shade matters, and partly because proximity matters. Someone cooks, and the smell drifts into other homes without asking permission. A dog barks, and everybody instantly knows whether it's stranger barking or cat on a roof barking. Familiarity becomes a kind of security system. People don't need to know everything. They need to know their immediate world. Tonight, you borrow that closeness. Inside a room, there's a practical kind of magic: storage. Baskets of grain, jars of oil, a hook with dried herbs. Storage is time you can eat later. It turns survival from a daily panic into a manageable schedule. It also turns arguments into paperwork, and yes, that's funny in a sleepy way. Cities didn't just invent kings and temples. They invented receipts. They needed proof that a shipment arrived, that taxes were paid, that a promise was kept. And the moment you have receipts, you have the seed of writing. Writing is memory that refuses to expire. A human voice pressed into clay, stone, wood, paint, so it can cross days and centuries. The calming part is that it's rarely dramatic. It's often mundane: lists of goods, agreements, deliveries, names. Ordinary life preserved because somebody had to stay organized. From the high view of your map, you drift over landscapes where systems take root. A river valley where soil is dark and generous. A dry plain where a canal makes the difference between maybe and we're fine. A coastline where boats hop from port to port, carrying not only goods but habits, recipes, and borrowed words. Trade is a surprisingly soothing concept from far enough away. It means strangers can meet and choose exchange instead of violence. It means ideas can travel faster than armies. Above all of it, water runs like a steady line through the story. Rivers become clocks. Flood seasons become calendars. Wells become negotiations with the ground. Even places that look dry on your map are built around storing, sharing, and respecting water. You can almost hear it. Clay jars being filled, channels murmuring, footsteps near a riverbank when the heat finally loosens its grip. And then there's the sky. Night isn't just after work in the ancient world, it's instruction. Travelers use stars as directions. Farmers watch the moon. Early observers notice that some lights move differently than others and start keeping track. Not because they're trying to be poetic, but because tracking the sky helps you track the year. The sky becomes a schedule, and schedules are comforting because they don't ask you to improvise. When you can't control the river or the weather, you ritualize. You make routines out of hope. A shared meal, a shared song, a shared story told into the dark because the dark is listening. Picture a courtyard, people sitting low, passing food from a bowl. Someone talks softly. A child falls asleep halfway through, face relaxed, completely unconcerned with whether the plot makes sense. An adult keeps talking anyway, because the story is also a way to keep the air warm with human sound. If your mind tries to race, if it wants to demand, what's the point? You give it a point it can hold like a smooth stone. Ancient civilization is a set of inventions designed to reduce daily stress. Store food, move water, keep records, build paths, coordinate work. It doesn't remove fear or loss or conflict. Humans are too inventive for that. It just makes life legible enough that people can breathe between problems. And because humans are humans, usefulness always sits beside beauty. A plain pot still gets a graceful curve. A wall still gets a painted band of color. A tool still gets a carved mark that says, quietly, this is mine, or this is sacred, or this is how we do things here. Your brain likes that combination. It likes meaning that also looks good. On your map, routes begin to glow, paths worn into earth by repetition. People walked here yesterday. They will walk here tomorrow. Over time, repetition becomes connection, and connection becomes the bigger miracle. A person in one city can learn an idea invented in another city without ever meeting the inventor. A stronger brick, a better plow, a cleaner drain, a new sound turned into a symbol. Civilization spreads the way sleep spreads, gradually, then all at once without needing force. So the night map continues in small patches of warm light. A river city here, a poor town there, a settlement guarding a mountain pass. The world is not one civilization. It's many experiments running side by side. Different climates, different materials, different beliefs, yet the same deep challenge. How do you get a lot of people to share space without tearing it apart? Some places answer with law. Some answer with ritual. Some answer with engineering. Most answer with a messy blend of all three. The grandeur is in the patience. A canal dug across seasons. A wall repaired every year. A temple expanded by people who knew they would never see it finished, and built anyway. That long thinking softens you. It makes your day feel smaller in a useful way. Your problems are real, but they do not need to be solved tonight. Your breathing eases. The map stops being an assignment and becomes a place. You aren't studying, you're visiting. You can almost feel the temperature shift as you move from desert edge to riverbank, from windy plateau to sheltered valley. You can almost hear the difference between a market at dusk and the silence after the gates close, when the city becomes a sleeping animal. Walls like ribs, streets like veins, small lights like slow eyes. And somewhere ahead on the map, barely forming yet, there's a particular kind of glow, one that keeps its memory in clay, tracks its goods with careful marks, and watches the sky like it's reading a patient clock. Your attention eases toward that glow with a steady pull, like drifting closer to warmth without needing to name it out loud. That glow grows clearer, and it stops being an abstract warmth on a map and becomes a real city with real edges. Uruk, resting beside water that refuses to stay still. The night air sits low over the canals, cool enough to feel like a hand on your forehead, and the city sounds are smaller than you expect. No roaring traffic, No constant mechanical whine, just the soft slap of water against a bank, the occasional creak of a rope, a muted conversation that travels a little farther because there's less noise competing for attention. Uruk feels busy in the way an anthill feels busy. Organized movement, purposeful routes, everyone carrying something that matters. You can sense the logic beneath it. Water is the first logic. The canals aren't decorative, they're arteries. They bring life from the river into fields, into gardens, into the city itself. In daylight, they're work. At night, they're a lullaby with a practical job. Along one canal, a reed boat slides through the dark like it's practiced this exact motion 1,000 times. It probably has. The boat is shallow, light, and confident, guided by someone who knows every bend by feel. Cargo rides low, bundles of reeds, jars sealed with resin, maybe sacks of barley that smell faintly sweet and dusty. Even the air around food feels different here. You can smell tomorrow's bread before it exists. The city's bricks hold the day's warmth, then let it go slowly. Brick is another kind of patience. Clay-shaped, dried, fired, stacked. The entire place is, in a very literal way, built out of the same mud that sticks to ankles at the river's edge. It's comforting, that loop. Nothing exotic is required for civilization to happen. Just attention, repetition, and the stubborn belief that things can be made reliable. Reliability is the quiet obsession in Uruk. It's what turns a settlement into a civilization, and it's what makes the whole atmosphere oddly soothing. You can feel it in the way doors close, in the way storage rooms are organized, in the way people measure and record, because memory is a lovely creature, but it's also unreliable and slightly dramatic. Somewhere nearby, behind a wall that muffles the street, a scribe presses a reed stylus into soft clay. The sound is almost nothing, tiny taps, a faint scrape, yet it carries an entire economic system on its back. Clay accepts the marks without argument. A wedge here, a line there. Simple shapes that somehow hold meaning. Not poetry, at least not most of the time. Mostly numbers, goods, names, dates. The glamorous heart of early writing. Yes, the barley arrived. If that sounds boring, good. Boring is stable. Boring is the reason you can sleep. Uruk is one of those places where boredom becomes an achievement. People have arranged life so well that they can afford to care about paperwork. The earliest marks aren't even trying to be pretty. They're trying to be clear. A picture becomes a sign becomes a sound. Over time, those signs turn into the wedge-shaped impressions people later call cuneiform, because it looks like the stylus is leaving little triangular footprints in clay. The system grows, not because someone sat down and decided to invent writing in a dramatic flash of genius, but because the city kept asking the same question over and over. How do we keep track? Keeping track is a gentle kind of power. Whoever can count can plan. Whoever can plan can store. Whoever can store can survive drought, feed workers, build walls, and keep promises, at least the promises that can be audited. So the scribes become important in the quietest way possible. Not by sword, by stylus. Picture the room where they work. It's cooler than outside, shaded, smells like damp clay and smoke residue. Tablets sit in stacks, some still soft, some drying, some already hardened. The room has the feel of an archive, but also a workshop. This is manufacturing, just not the kind with gears. Information is being produced. A tablet gets finished, and before it dries, someone rolls a cylinder seal across it, like a tiny rolling pin carved with intricate scenes. The seal leaves a continuous image in the clay, a signature that can't be faked easily, a mark of identity, ownership, authority. It's surprisingly elegant. Even here, where practicality rules, beauty sneaks in through the side door. The seal might show gods, animals, feasts, strange hybrid creatures that look like the artist fell asleep mid-thought and kept carving anyway. The city runs on those impressions. They are proof. Proof that the oil was measured. Proof that the textiles were counted. Proof that a worker received a ration. Proof that a temple storehouse released grain, for a project. It's bureaucracy, yes, but it's also the invention of trust at scale. When a city gets large, you can't personally know everyone. You replace personal familiarity with systems. Receipts become a social technology. And the numbers themselves, those numbers are still living with you, tucked inside your modern life like an ancient stowaway. Sumerians lean into a base 60 system, which sounds odd until you realize how convenient it is. 60 breaks cleanly into so many parts: halves, thirds, quarters, fifths, sixths. It's flexible. It's practical. It's the reason your hour has 60 minutes and your minute has 60 seconds. The clock beside your bed is quietly Sumerian, which is a nice thought if you like the idea of time being a very old habit rather than a personal enemy. In Uruk, time feels less like pressure and more like rhythm. Not because life is easy, life is never easy, but because the city has agreed on how to measure things. A measure of grain, a measure of oil, a length of cloth, a workday, a festival day. Agreement creates calm. The moment everyone uses the same weights, the same measures, arguments become shorter. Shorter arguments are a gift to the nervous system. Outside, water keeps moving. Irrigation is not just engineering. It's a collective relationship. Canals need cleaning. Banks need reinforcing. Gates need monitoring. When a river rises or falls, the entire community responds. This shared responsibility knits people together. It's the opposite of loneliness. Even if you don't like your neighbor, you still like having food next season, so you show up with a basket and a shovel and do the work. Civilization, in its most honest form, is people cooperating because nature does not negotiate. Uruk's fields stretch beyond the city, dark and quiet at night, but never truly inactive. The soil holds water from the canals. Date palms stand like calm silhouettes, their fronds barely moving. In the distance, you can imagine a night watchman walking a boundary, listening for anything out of place. The city depends on predictability. Predictability depends on vigilance. Vigilance, in a strange way, becomes its own comfort. Someone is awake, so you don't have to be. Back inside the city, lamps flicker in courtyards. Families settle into the last part of the day. Food is simple but satisfying: bread, onions, maybe fish, maybe a stew thickened with grain. And then there's beer. Yes, beer. Because fermented grain is easier to store than fresh grain and safer than questionable water in some contexts. This isn't modern beer in a cold glass with a perfect foam head. It's thick, cloudy, nourishing. People drink it through straws sometimes, not for style but to avoid the floating bits. The image is charming. A group of adults sharing a jar, each with a long straw, like a meeting of extremely relaxed insects. You can almost feel your brain unclench at the thought that even ancient nightlife had a practical snack attached to it. But the true nighttime heartbeat in Uruk is higher up, above the courtyards and canals, where the city's largest structures cut into the sky. A ziggurat rises in layered terraces, its silhouette heavy and geometric against the stars. It's more than architecture. It's a statement that human beings can build a mountain if the land won't provide one. Climbing it is like climbing the city's ambition. Up there, the air is cooler. The sounds from below soften into a distant murmur. This is where stargazers stand, not with telescopes, just eyes trained by repetition. The sky here is not washed out by electric light. It's deep, crowded, detailed. Stars look like they're close enough to touch if you had a ladder tall enough and an absolutely unreasonable amount of confidence. Those watchers aren't only romantic dreamers, either. They are record keepers, just like the scribes. Only their ledger is the night sky. They notice cycles. They note where a bright planet appears, how it moves, when it disappears, when it returns. They organize time by celestial behavior, which is a very calm way of living. The universe provides a schedule that doesn't hurry, doesn't argue, doesn't send reminders. It simply repeats. In a world where floods can surprise and drought can threaten, that repetition matters. The stars become reassurance. Even if the harvest fails, Orion still rises. Even if politics turn sour, the moon still waxes and wanes. The sky is the oldest stable thing you can look at. Sometime during the night, a watcher identifies a pattern and mentions it to another. Not loudly, quietly, like sharing a secret. They may interpret it as omen, as message, as divine mood. Ancient people often connect sky events to meaning, because meaning is how you make uncertainty tolerable. You don't have to share their belief system to feel the comfort of practice. Observing, recording, interpreting, those actions steady the mind. Down below, the scribes do the same with grain. Up above, the stargazers do it with light. Two kinds of accounting. One counts barley, one counts time. Both turn chaos into structure. You can feel how these systems feed each other. Agriculture creates surplus. Surplus supports specialists, scribes, builders, observers. Specialists create better systems, better records, better measurements, better planning. Better planning stabilizes the city, which protects the fields, which creates more surplus. It's a loop that hums softly like a machine that doesn't grind, just turns. Even the myths, those stories of gods and heroes, fit into this calmer architecture. They aren't only entertainment. They're a shared language for the city's anxieties and hopes. A goddess associated with love and war. A sky god who feels remote. A river's mood framed as personality. Myths give shape to forces that otherwise feel shapeless. People sleep better with a name for the unknown, even if the name comes with dramatic family drama among deities. Ancient gods can be wonderfully petty, which is almost reassuring. It means the universe isn't only cold physics. It has character. It has motives. It can be negotiated with through offerings, rituals, careful words. And careful words matter in a city built on writing. In Uruk, words aren't only spoken. They can be pressed into clay, stored, revisited, proven. A promise can outlive the speaker. A complaint can survive long enough to embarrass someone later. A contract can become a kind of invisible wall. If your modern mind is tempted to spiral, tempted to plan tomorrow or replay yesterday, this place offers a different focus. Small certainties. The feel of clay under a stylus. The easy arithmetic of measures. The steady movement of water in a canal. The slow turning of stars. The city at night becomes a set of gentle instructions. Keep track. Share resources. Respect the river. Watch the sky. Sleep when darkness arrives, because morning will come whether you cooperate or not. And somewhere in the scribal room, a tablet dries in the warm air. Its marks harden into permanence. It might record something ordinary, rations for workers, deliveries to a storehouse, but also carries an unintended message across millennia. A human hand was here, trying to make life manageable, trying to make the future less frightening. That's the part you can hold on to as your breathing slows. In Uruk, civilization isn't a loud triumph. It's a quiet agreement repeated every day. Count the grain, mark the clay, guide the water, study the stars. When the city finally settles deeper into darkness, the canals keep murmuring, the ziggurat keeps standing, and the sky keeps its patient rhythm. An enormous, calm clock above a place that learned how to measure time without letting time bully it. The canal water from Uruk still seems to cling to your imagination for a moment, that soft slap against mud banks, until the map shifts under your inner gaze and the river becomes something wider, smoother, more confident. The Nile doesn't feel like a hurried problem to solve. It feels like a long, steady sentence, one that keeps going even if nobody reads it out loud. Night on the Nile carries a different kind of quiet. The air is cooler, almost silky, and the water reflects the sky so neatly that it's hard to tell where the world ends and the constellations begin. A boat glides past in near silence, and the only real sound is the gentle effort of oars dipping and lifting, like the river is breathing through human hands. Egypt's calm begins with a fact so soothing it borders on unfair. The river arrives on schedule. Not perfectly, not politely, but reliably enough that entire generations build their lives around its moods. The flood comes, the land drinks, the silt settles, the fields darken into fertility, and the people do what people always do when nature offers a pattern. Turn it into a calendar, a ritual, a story, a set of rules that make uncertainty feel smaller. The year isn't measured only by the sun, it's measured by the river's phases. The flood season changes everything. Work shifts, travel changes, storage matters even more. When the water spreads across the floodplain, the land becomes a shimmering sheet, and villages feel like islands with familiar edges. In daylight, it's a bright spectacle. At night, it's a mirror that doubles the stars. That doubling does something gentle to your mind. It makes the sky feel closer. It makes time feel less like pressure and more like repetition. The same bright star rises. The same season returns. The same work gets done. This is not the modern promise that everything will be different tomorrow. This is the older promise that the basics will hold if people keep the rhythm. On the riverbank, a home settles into evening the way a body settles into sleep. Heat loosens its grip. Shadows thicken. A small lamp burns with a steady flame, fed by oil that smells faintly of the plant it came from. There's food, and it's simple, and it's real. Bread that came from grain that came from the river's generosity. It's hard to overstate how central bread is here. Bread is not a side. Bread is the plan. The soothing part is how ordinary it all feels. People grind grain, mix dough, bake in clay ovens. The smell is warm and steady, the kind of smell that makes your shoulders drop without permission. Even the labor has a rhythm. Grind, sift, knead, wait, bake. Waiting is built in. The dough has to become itself in its own time, like your nervous system quietly insisting it will not be rushed. Beer sits beside bread in the daily story, not as some party trick, but as another form of stored grain and managed fermentation. It's nutrition, it's hydration, it's routine. A worker's ration isn't just a number. It's a feeling of being held by a system. Someone counted. Someone recorded. Someone made sure tomorrow would not arrive empty-handed. And yes, scribes appear again, because civilization loves a good record. If Uruk taught you that writing begins with receipts, Egypt shows how writing becomes a whole atmosphere. Papyrus doesn't require the same firing and stacking as clay tablets. It's lighter, faster, made from reeds that grow because the Nile allows them to grow. The very material of writing is an extension of the river. Words here feel like river plants pressed flat into meaning. Hieroglyphs aren't only functional. They're also unapologetically beautiful, because Egyptian writing often behaves like art that refuses to choose a single job. A bird is a sound and an image. A reed leaf is a letter and a plant, and a reminder of where paper comes from. Even if the exact reading escapes you, the shapes still calm you. The world becomes symbolic in a way that makes it feel curated rather than chaotic. A temple stands somewhere nearby, and temples in Egypt have their own nightly hush. The outer courtyard's cool. The stone holds the day's heat and releases it slowly, like brick did in Uruk, only grander, cleaner, and more determined to last forever. The walls are covered with reliefs and painted scenes, processions, offerings, gods receiving gifts with expressions that suggest they've seen this all before and would appreciate it continuing exactly the same way. Inside, routine becomes sacred. The statues of gods are treated like living presences, not because stone is secretly alive, but because ritual is a way to stabilize the relationship between humans and forces they cannot control. There are daily actions: washing, anointing, offering food, burning incense. The precise details vary across time and place, but the core idea stays steady. Care for the divine, and the divine will care for the order of the world. That word, order, matters here. Not the strict, punitive kind, the soothing kind, the kind that says the sun will rise, the river will return, the harvest will come if the right steps are taken. The Egyptians had a deep affection for cosmic balance. The universe is not random, it's arranged. If you maintain harmony, everything holds. Your mind likes that. It likes the idea that the world has a spine. And then there are the everyday routines that quietly support the grand religious ones. Linen, for example. Linen is everywhere, and it begins as flax, plants grown and harvested because the Nile makes cultivation possible. The fibers get processed and spun and woven into cloth that feels cool against the skin. In this heat, linen isn't fashion, it's sanity. It's also status because finer linen takes more work, and work can be counted, stored, traded, taxed. You can almost hear the soft whisper of cloth in a night breeze, the sound of something clean and controlled moving through warm air. Clothing isn't the only place Egypt seeks comfort. The body itself is treated like a project worth maintaining. Cleanliness is practical in a hot climate, but it becomes more than practical. Oils and perfumes show up as daily tools, not indulgences. The skin gets protected from sun and wind. Hair gets managed. Eyes get lined with kohl, partly for beauty, partly for glare, partly because people tend to do several things with one habit if they can. Efficiency is ancient. Perfumes and unguents are their own quiet universe. Resins, flowers, herbs, scents designed to cling gently, to soften harsh air, to mark special moments. At banquets, perfume cones can be worn on the head, so scent melts slowly through the evening, because apparently the human brain has always loved a timed release feature. The air becomes layered. Incense from a shrine, lotus from the water, myrrh and frankincense drifting in from trade routes that reach far beyond the river and, yes, even the practical oddities. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? It's one of those details that sound like a dare. Ancient cosmetics and skin protection used whatever was available: oils, mineral powders, plant-based pastes, and the more strange-sounding ingredients tend to stick in modern memory because the internet loves chaos. The calmer truth beneath the weirdness is simple. People looked at the sun, looked at their skin, and decided to solve a problem with the materials at hand. That is the ancient mindset in a nutshell. Observe, adapt, repeat. The river supports all of it, including the most magnificent construction projects that still make modern humans stare and go quiet. Pyramids don't rise because of a single heroic moment. They rise because logistics become religion. Stone gets quarried, shaped, transported, set. Teams rotate. Supplies move. Schedules get followed. The Nile helps because moving heavy loads by water is far easier than dragging them across open land. Barges become silent carriers of ambition, floating blocks downstream under sun by day and stars by night. At night, the silhouette of a pyramid is not loud. It's simple geometry against the sky, a perfect triangle of darkness. It feels like someone drew a shape on the horizon to prove humans can cooperate long enough to build a mountain out of math. And the temples, too. Colonnades, obelisks, gateways that frame the stars like architecture is trying to politely contain the universe. Obelisks are especially dramatic in that understated way. A single tall stone, tapered and precise, pointing upward like a finger reminding the sky that humans have noticed it. What's soothing is the scale of intention. These structures are built for time, not for trends, not for quick applause. They're built with the quiet arrogance of people who believe their routines should echo forever. It's a little funny, honestly. Modern life can barely commit to a phone charger for 2 years, and here are people stacking stone with the confidence that their work will outlive every argument they've ever had. The mystery deepens in the way Egypt blends practicality and symbolism until you can't tell where one ends. The Nile floods and deposits silt, practical. The flood becomes linked to cosmic stories, symbolic. Crops rise, practical. The rise becomes part of sacred order, symbolic. A boat crosses the river, practical. The crossing hints at transformation, symbolic. In this world, every action gets 2 layers, one for survival, one for meaning. Meaning is the part your mind craves when it's tired. It wants to feel that life has a pattern, not just tasks. Even in sleep, the Egyptians were thinking in patterns. Tombs are filled with texts and images meant to guide, protect, reassure. The details can get intense, and the ancient imagination could be vivid in ways that don't belong in a bedtime whisper. So the focus stays on the gentler layer, a culture that treated continuity as comfort. Names preserved, stories preserved, bodies preserved. The underlying desire is the same desire you feel when you save a photo or keep a letter. Don't let what matters disappear. Out on the river, a fisherman checks nets by lamplight, the glow reflecting in small trembling coins on the water. A bird calls from reeds. Somewhere farther off, a village has quiet laughter that rises and falls like smoke. The night holds it all. A sense of permanence comes not from the stone, but from the rhythm. Daily work, seasonal cycles, sacred routines repeating with the reliability of breath. And because you're here to fall asleep with facts rather than wrestle them, the facts slip in gently, attached to sensations. The Nile shapes agriculture through flood and irrigation. Papyrus turns river plants into writing. Linen turns flax into cool cloth. Oils and perfumes turn heat into something manageable. Monument building turns logistics into awe. All of it turns human anxiety into organized habits. The river keeps flowing while the city sleeps. It doesn't stop for anyone. It carries silt, carries boats, carries reflections, carries time. That steady movement is the final gift. You don't have to push the night forward. The Nile does it for you, sliding through darkness with the calm confidence of something that has been doing this longer than any empire can remember. The Nile's steady mirror stays in your mind for a few breaths. Then the map slides east as if a quiet hand is turning a page. The air changes first. Less river perfume, more dry wind. The route crosses long stretches where the ground looks like it's been thinking for thousands of years and hasn't bothered to share the conclusion. Then the land softens again and water returns, not as a single iconic ribbon like the Nile, but as a network of rivers and seasonal channels that braid and unbraid across wide plains. This is the Indus Valley world, and it greets you with a kind of calm confidence that feels almost modern, which is slightly rude of a civilization that flourished so long ago. The night here is cooler than the day, and the cities don't announce themselves with one gigantic monument screaming, "Look what we built." They announce themselves with something more intimate. A street corner that makes sense, a brick wall that's straight, a drain that actually works. Mohenjo-daro rests in the darkness like a carefully folded piece of geometry. The streets form a grid, not because grids are trendy, but because grids are legible. When a city is legible, you can move through it without arguing with it. Even in low lamplight, the logic holds. You can picture the main streets wide enough for carts and the smaller lanes branching off like commer veins. You don't feel lost here. You feel guided. The first detail that settles your nerves is the brickwork. Indus bricks are famously standardized, as if the entire region agreed on the same quiet rule and then stuck to it for centuries. The proportions are consistent enough that walls come together cleanly, corners align, repairs fit. You don't get that kind of consistency without systems, without measurements, shared norms, and a general refusal to tolerate chaos in construction. There's a gentle satisfaction in imagining builders stacking bricks that match, the way your brain relaxes when a puzzle piece clicks into place. It's the same comfort you felt with Uruk's clay tablets and Egypt's scheduled river. Only here the comfort has sharp edges and right angles. A city built like this is a city that expects tomorrow to arrive and wants tomorrow to be functional. In the dim light, you pass homes that don't look like temporary shelters. They look like decisions. Many have inner courtyards, private open spaces that hold air and light and family life. The walls face the street with fewer openings, which creates a feeling of inward calm. It's less show off your wealth to passers-by, and more, please let me eat dinner without the entire neighborhood auditioning for a reality show in my doorway. And then you notice something that feels almost too familiar. Wells. Not one ceremonial well that everyone lines up at, but many wells distributed through the city, like the planners cared about access. Water sits at the center of everything again, but the Indus approach feels quietly democratic. You don't have to cross the whole city to get it. You have it near you because someone decided that daily life should be efficient. That efficiency shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. Steps are placed where feet naturally go. Platforms are built for work. Storage spaces feel intentional. The city doesn't look like it was thrown together in a rush. It looks like it was adjusted over time, refined, tidied, improved. Like someone kept asking, how do we make this easier? It's hard not to admire the plumbing, because the plumbing is basically the Indus civilization's signature move, and it's a move so solid that it makes modern people quietly embarrassed about their own priorities. Along the streets, there are covered drains, brick-lined channels that carry wastewater away instead of letting it sit and sour. Some houses have their own drains feeding into the larger system, which means privacy and cleanliness weren't afterthoughts. They were built in. Imagine walking along a street in the evening, the temperature easing, and realizing the city doesn't stink. Not the way you'd expect an ancient city to smell. There's still smoke from cooking fires, still animals, still human life in all its honest reality. But there's also management. Waste is guided away. Water is directed. The unpleasant parts of daily existence are handled with quiet competence. Even the drains have inspection points, small access openings where someone could remove debris, clear blockages, maintain flow. Maintenance is one of the most underrated ancient miracles. Anyone can build something once. Keeping it working is where civilization shows its maturity. Indus cities understood that, and the evidence is sitting right there under your imagined feet, carrying yesterday away, so tomorrow doesn't have to trip over it. The calm deepens when you approach the Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro, because nothing says we're organized like a large, carefully constructed public bathing structure that didn't have to exist. It's lined, sealed, built with steps, surrounded by rooms that suggest preparation and ritual. You can feel the temperature shift around it, stone cooling faster than air, the basin holding darkness like a bowl. Bathing here is not just washing off dust. It's a social act with gravity. Water becomes ceremony again, but in a more intimate, human-scale way than a pyramid or a ziggurat. There's something profoundly soothing about the idea of a city that invests in communal cleanliness, not as punishment, not as moral panic, but as routine. In the low light, you can picture someone stepping down into that water, the surface trembling, the sound small and rounded. The world narrows to the feel of coolness on skin, the quiet echo of a walled courtyard, the sense that life can be made orderly even when the outside world is unpredictable. Predictability matters here because the Indus landscape is a negotiation. Rivers can shift course, floods can surprise, monsoon patterns can change. So the cities respond with planning. Raised platforms, robust brickwork, drainage, organization that tries to stay one step ahead of water's moods. Egypt leaned on a river that behaved like a schedule. The Indus world lives with water that can be generous and impulsive. The answer is engineering that feels like calm stubbornness. And there's mystery too, the kind that keeps your curiosity awake without making your body tense. Indus seals turn up, small carved objects, often with animals and a line of script above them. The animals feel like emblems, a unicorn-like creature that is probably not a literal unicorn, bulls with heavy shoulders, elephants, rhinos. The carvings are crisp enough that you can imagine the artisan's hand steadying itself for the final lines. The script itself remains undeciphered, which means the words are present but closed, like a door you can't quite open. That could be frustrating, but at night it becomes soothing. It's a reminder that not everything is owed to you. Some knowledge stays quiet. Some voices remain private. The seals still communicate identity and authority and trade, even if you can't read their exact language. And trade. Trade connects you back to the glow of Uruk from earlier. Goods move between these worlds. Ideas move too. You can imagine a bead from the Indus Valley traveling west, landing in Mesopotamia, being admired in lamplight, passed from hand to hand, its smoothness carrying the memory of a different river, a different city grid, a different kind of order. Bead making is its own soft obsession here. Carnelian beads, for example, warm orange redstone shaped, drilled, polished until they catch light like embers. The process takes patience and skill. You can picture an artisan in a courtyard, the sound of tiny tools against stone, the careful turning of a bead so the hole is straight, the satisfaction of finishing something small and perfect. These are objects that travel, objects that become silent ambassadors of craft. Cotton appears in this story too, woven into cloth in a world where textiles matter as much as brick. Imagine the feel of cotton in warm air, lighter, softer, less clingy than many alternatives. It's another example of daily comfort being treated as worth the effort. Civilization isn't only about kings and battles. It's about making ordinary life less abrasive. What's striking is the overall tone of the Indocities. You don't see obvious giant royal statues glaring down at you. You don't see endless propaganda carved into every surface. There's a kind of restraint. That restraint becomes part of the mystery. What social structure held this all together? How did they coordinate standards across such a wide region? How did they manage resources and labor without leaving the same kind of loud royal fingerprints seen elsewhere? The quiet answer might be that they simply valued civic order more than individual spectacle, or that their spectacle was built into the city itself, into the fact that drains were covered and bricks matched and streets made sense. It's the kind of flex that doesn't need a crown. Your mind wanders through a neighborhood where a house has a small room set aside for bathing. Water is poured, collected, drained. The design suggests privacy and dignity. It suggests that even in an ancient city, people wanted a moment alone to feel clean, to reset, to come back to themselves. That impulse feels so familiar it almost makes you laugh softly, because nothing really changes. Humans keep building systems so they can have 5 minutes of peace. You can feel the nighttime life in small cues. A low conversation behind a wall, the clink of pottery, the faint sound of footsteps on packed earth. The city isn't loud, it's functioning. A guard might pass at an intersection, not dramatic, just present. Someone might cover a jar to keep insects out. A child might finally fall asleep in a courtyard, head on someone's lap, while the adults keep talking in quieter voices because the night demands gentleness. And the overall grandeur isn't a single monument. It's the scale of coordination. Thousands of bricks laid with shared standards, kills firing consistently, streets aligned, drain networks maintained, wells distributed, a public bath constructed with care. All of it done without leaving you a neat little translation key for their writing, which is either annoyingly elegant or elegantly annoying. There's another soothing layer to the mystery. You can sense that these cities understood boundaries, public space and private space, water that belongs to everyone and water that belongs to a household, clean water and used water. The act of separating, channeling, and managing is the act of reducing stress. Stress is often a feeling of everything mixing together, problems bleeding into each other, thoughts piling up. Indus planning does the opposite. It keeps categories clean. It makes you wonder what a modern brain would feel like if it lived in a world where the streets were quieter, the air was darker, and the systems were built for human scale instead of constant expansion. Maybe that's why this civilization feels so relaxing to visit in your imagination. It offers a model of sophistication that's gentle rather than aggressive. Time passes, and in your mind you can feel seasons shifting. The rivers change mood. Floods come and go. Over centuries, the patterns that once held begin to wobble. Climate shifts, river courses alter, trade routes change. The calm order doesn't vanish in a single catastrophe. It thins, disperses, relocates. People adapt, because adaptation is what humans do when the environment renegotiates the contract. But tonight, the city still holds. The drains still carry water away. The bricks still align. The great bath still waits in darkness like a quiet promise. The seals still press identity into clay. The wells still offer cool water to hands that know the rope's weight. The mysteries remain intact enough to keep your curiosity warm without keeping you awake. And somewhere farther east, beyond these brick grids and calm drainage channels, a different kind of night is gathering. One that glows with firelight reflected in bronze. One that listens to questions carved into bone. One that turns ritual into metal and answers into smoke. The brick grid and quiet drains fade behind you the way a shoreline fades when the boat keeps moving and the night turns cooler, drier, edged with smoke. Firelight appears ahead, not as a single blaze, but as steady points of orange, like a careful city refusing to waste heat. The air carries earth, charcoal, and a faint metallic tang, the smell of work that continues after sunset. This is the Shang world, and it meets you with a question. Not a dramatic, existential question, something plain, urgent, and familiar to any human nervous system. Will it rain? Will the harvest hold? Will sickness pass? Will a journey go smoothly? Will a birth go safely? In the dark, uncertainty feels heavier, so people learn ways to lift it, even if just a little. You step into a courtyard where a small group gathers around a controlled fire. Someone holds an ox shoulder blade, pale in the flicker. Someone else leans in with a tool and the calm concentration of a person following a method. The bone has been prepared, cleaned, shaped, sometimes polished, and small pits have been carved into it like tiny sockets waiting for heat. A question is scratched into the surface in early characters. The stroke's neat because the question has to be official before the universe is invited to respond. The act of carving already slows everything down. It forces precision. Which ancestor is being addressed? What day is it? What offering will be made? What outcome is being requested? You can feel the mind settle as the question becomes specific, because a vague worry is harder to hold than a clear sentence. Heat touches one pit. The bone answers with a sharp, quick crack, small enough to startle, then vanish into silence. Another pit, another crack, branching like a thin river in reverse. Everyone watches the pattern, not the noise, because the pattern is where meaning is kept. A specialist reads it with practiced restraint, the way a seasoned sailor reads the wind without making a speech about it. The answer isn't delivered like a lightning bolt. It arrives as an interpretation. Favorable, not favorable, proceed, postpone. The point is less about perfect prediction and more about making a decision feel anchored. The question has been asked properly. The ancestors have been consulted properly. A choice can be made without the mind chewing itself raw all night. And then, because humans never resist documentation, the result is often carved right there on the bone. Sometimes later outcomes get added too, like a quiet follow-up. It rained, it didn't, the child was born healthy, the journey was delayed. It's ancient accountability, the sleepy proof that people long ago also wanted reality to match the plan, or at least wanted a record when it didn't. These oracle bones and turtle shells end up holding some of the earliest large bodies of Chinese writing. You can feel the difference compared with the worlds you've already visited. Uruk pressed memory into clay so grain could be counted. Egypt turned river plants into papyrus so life could be recorded with elegance. Here, writing grows directly out of a question. Anxiety becomes text. The future is asked, and the asking becomes permanent. Ancestor reverence sits behind it all, steady and practical. The dead aren't treated as distant. They're part of the structure that keeps the living from feeling alone in their risks. A chain of names, a line of authority, a sense that guidance can travel across time. Even if you don't share the belief, the comfort is easy to recognize. When the world feels too large, belonging to a long line makes the present feel less frightening. The smoke shifts, and you follow that metallic scent into a deeper glow. A foundry breathes in the dark, furnace light pulsing like a slow heart. People move with timing that looks almost gentle, except molten metal is not gentle, and everyone knows it. The heat is controlled, the work precise, because a single mistake costs more than pride. Shang bronze feels like visible certainty. In the firelight, finished vessels catch warmth and hold it, their surfaces glowing as if they remember the furnace. They sit heavy and quiet, cups, basins, tall containers, decorated with patterns that pull your gaze in and keep it there. Stylized faces, curling lines, symmetrical creatures that look half animal, half idea. The famous mask motif stares back with two eyes suggested more than described. Hypnotic in the way a repeating pattern can be hypnotic. It occupies your attention like a steady chant. The craft behind that calm beauty is quietly intense. Clay molds are formed, carved, assembled in pieces, then metal is poured so the design emerges already raised and crisp, as if the vessel was born finished. It's engineering hiding inside art. It's also a social statement. Bronze takes minds, transport, fuel, skilled labor, and organization. Every vessel is a condensed city of effort. You imagine a ritual hall in the evening, warmer than the courtyard, the air scented with wine, cooked grain, and incense. Bronzes are arranged with the care of a ceremony that has been repeated so many times it has worn a smooth path through memory. A vessel is lifted with both hands because weight demands respect. Food is offered, not rushed. Music might pulse softly, drums, bells, something that feels like a heartbeat the room has agreed to share. The mood is solemn, but not grim. It's the feeling of people keeping the world in balance by repetition. These objects aren't made only to look impressive. They live in ritual. Food and drink are offered in them, not casually, but with the careful seriousness of people maintaining a relationship between worlds. It echoes the Egyptian instinct to keep cosmic order through routine. Only here the order is carried by metal and smoke, by vessels meant to last long enough to outlive the hands that pour into them. Outside the foundry, the night opens up. Rooflines cut against the sky, crowded with stars. You feel the same upward attention you felt on Uruk's ziggurat. Humans looking up, not because they're trying to be poetic, but because the sky is the most reliable schedule they have. The moon's phases matter. Seasonal markers matter. Days are counted, months are watched, and rituals are timed so they land on the right night, under the right sky. The stars become another ledger, not written on bone, but remembered, observed, and repeated until they feel like a map. Stand beside a watcher for a moment. Their gesture is small, confident, pointing out a recurring cluster, a return that signals a shift in season. That calm certainty spreads into your body. Someone knows where they are in time. Someone can tell whether the year is turning toward planting or harvest, toward cold or warmth. It's the kind of knowledge that lowers the heart rate without asking permission. The oracle bow and fire in the courtyard and the star tracking above the roofs belong to the same impulse. Reduce uncertainty by giving it form. Read the cracks. Read the sky. Record the result. Decide. Move on. It's almost funny if you tilt your head. Imagine a powerful king surrounded by bronze and still needing to consult a shell to choose the day for a hunt. Power doesn't erase the unknown. It just gives the unknown better lighting. Your mind, tired in the best way, accepts the lesson without argument. You don't need perfect control to feel steadier. You need a method, a rhythm, a few reliable steps that say, enough for today. The fire drops to embers. The foundry cools. The bronze vessels wait in the dark, holding a last shimmer of warmth the way brick held warmth in the Indus streets and stone held warmth in Egypt. Above, the stars keep their patient repetition, never rushing, never demanding. And beyond this smoke and bronze night, the air begins to taste faintly of salt, as if the world is turning toward a sea where walls will be painted with dolphins and the darkness will feel lighter, more coastal, more blue. The taste of smoke and bronze lingers for a second, then the air thins and shifts the way it does when you're leaving a crowded room and stepping outside. Salt arrives first, faint but unmistakable, and with it a coolness that feels cleaner than river damp or furnace heat. The darkness ahead isn't heavy. It's open. The sea has that strange ability to make night feel spacious, like the world just exhaled. You're standing on a coastline where the water is so dark it looks like polished stone, and the moon lays a pale road across it, an invitation that doesn't rush you. Somewhere out there, a boat moves without hurry, the sound of its hull cutting through small waves barely reaching your ears. You don't hear markets or foundries now. You hear wind, water, and the soft creak of wood. It's a different civilization rhythm, less about canals and grain ledgers, more about tides, harbors, and the quiet confidence of people who know how to live with the horizon. Crete sits here like a calm anchor in the middle of routes. That's one of the most relaxing truths about the Minoan world. You can feel how connected it is without feeling trapped by it. Ships slide between islands, between coasts, carrying pottery, oils, textiles, saffron, metalwork, and the kind of gossip that travels faster than cargo ever will. Trade sounds like something modern people argue about on podcasts, but here it's simply movement, like blood in veins. The sea links. The sea teaches. The sea refuses to let any culture pretend it is the only one. You walk inland a little, and the air carries herbs crushed underfoot. Thyme, maybe, or something sharp and green that wakes your senses without waking your stress. The land rises and folds into hills, and then the architecture appears in the dimness. Not a single pyramid silhouette, not a ziggurat pointed at the sky, but a sprawling palace complex that feels almost playful in its complexity. Knossos is the name that floats up most often in modern memory, and you can see why. It doesn't look like a fortress. It looks like a living organism made of corridors, courtyards, light wells, staircases, and rooms nested inside rooms, the whole thing designed for movement. It's the kind of place that could make you lose your way in the gentlest manner possible. Not in a panic way, in a how did I end up in a storage room again way. If ancient architects had a sense of humor, this is where they hid it. The walls catch faint lamplight and return it softly, and then you notice the color. Not just traces, real color. Frescoes, painted scenes that refuse to stay quiet even after thousands of years. The famous dolphins appear in your mind as if they're still mid-swim, arcing through blue water, their bodies sleek, their motion captured in a way that feels more like joy than propaganda. It's hard to describe how calming it is to see a civilization paint sea life as decoration inside an elite building. It's like they invited the ocean indoors and expected it to behave. Those dolphins aren't random. They're a clue to the Minoan mood. This culture's imagery leans toward nature, movement, ritual, and celebration rather than constant war bragging. That doesn't mean the world was harmless. Nothing ancient is harmless, but it changes the atmosphere. You don't feel crushed by stone authority here. You feel surrounded by color and motion, as if the walls are breathing with you. You pass another fresco in your imagination, and the theme shifts to people. Figures with narrow waists and lively posture, hairstyled, jewelry catching light, clothing that looks designed to move. There are scenes of processions and offerings, and then the most famous, most debated image appears in the background of your mind like a moment paused mid-flight. Bull leaping. A powerful bull, a human figure vaulting over it in a gesture that looks half athletic, half ritual, wholly daring. It's the kind of detail that makes you blink and think politely that ancient humans sometimes had an unusual relationship with risk. It also feels like a culture comfortable with spectacle that isn't purely violent. The bull is not only an animal. It's an idea, strength, fertility, power, danger, energy. The leap becomes a way to touch that energy and survive it. People do this with many things. They take what scares them and turn it into ceremony so it can be handled. Uruk handled uncertainty with writing and numbers. Shang handled it with crack patterns on bone. Here, part of the handling looks like dance and sport and painted motion. In the palace's deeper spaces, another calming surprise waits. Storage. Always storage. Civilization never stops loving storage. It just changes the container. In Crete, you can picture long rooms lined with massive pithoi, huge clay jars taller than a child, their bellies rounded, their surfaces sometimes patterned. They hold olive oil, grain wine. They hold the ability to feed many people over time. They hold stability. It's the same comfort you felt earlier when baskets of grain sat in a quiet room in Uruk, except these jars feel more elegant, almost sculptural, as if someone insisted that even bulk storage should look good. Because of course they did. Humans have never met a functional object they couldn't also decorate. And because Minoans live near the sea, there's an extra layer: olive oil. Oil for cooking, for lamps, for skin, for trade. You can almost smell it, rich, faintly grassy. In Egypt, the body was managed with oils and scents. And here you can feel the same instinct: protect skin from sun, wind, salt air. It's comforting to realize that across different climates, people kept arriving at the same conclusion. Take care of the body, because you only get one, and it has to last through harvest season. Somewhere in the palace, water runs in a way that makes your modern brain do a small, approving nod. Minoan plumbing existed in forms that feel surprisingly advanced. Stone channels, drainage systems, even flush-like arrangements in certain contexts. You don't need to obsess over the engineering diagrams to feel the effect. The effect is simple. These people cared about moving water where it needed to go and moving waste away from where it shouldn't stay. The Indus Valley would approve quietly from across the map, like two ancient city planners exchanging a respectful glance. Your mind makes a soft callback without effort. Covered drains in Mohenjo-Daro, a great bath, and now, on an island in the Aegean, a palace that understands that comfort is often just clean water and smart channels. It's not glamorous, but it's the foundation beneath every glamorous thing. As you wander through this place, you notice something else that shapes the mood: the absence of heavy fortification in many Minoan centers, at least compared to the dramatic walls you might expect from later periods. That detail is sometimes debated and complicated. History always is, but the feeling remains: this is not a culture whose main architectural statement is keep everyone out. The statement feels more like come in, look at the murals, bring your trade goods, and try not to get lost in the hallway. The sea makes that possible. If your economy and identity are built on ships and exchange, you don't want every neighbor to be a permanent enemy. You want routes. You want allies. You want predictable interactions. The sea is a teacher of negotiation. It punishes arrogance quickly, and it rewards planning in the most straightforward way. You either arrive or you don't. At night, the harbor is its own kind of lullaby. Ropes creak against wood. Waves tap the stone edge in a repetitive rhythm. A lantern swings slightly, making a small moving circle of light on the dock. Sailors talk low, because sound carries over water. You can imagine the cargo: pottery, textiles, perhaps metal tools, stacked in shapes that feel like calm geometry. Someone checked a seal on a jar the way a scribe checked a tablet in Uruk. The methods differ. The motive is identical. Keep track, keep trust, keep the system steady. And then the script appears, quietly, like a door you can't quite open. Linear a writing system used in Minoan context that remains undeciphered. You can see its signs in your mind: clean strokes, repeated shapes, yet their meaning stays out of reach. It's like finding a song with the melody intact, but the lyrics blurred. Instead of being frustrating, the mystery becomes part of the relaxation. Not everything needs to be solved tonight. Some civilizations keep their inner voice private. You can still feel their preferences through what they built and painted. You can still feel their relationship with the sea through dolphins on a wall. You can still feel their ritual life through symbols. Horns of consecration shaped like stylized bullhorns perched on rooftops, and the double axe, the labres, appearing in sacred contexts as if it carried weight beyond metal. Symbols are how humans store meaning when language fails or disappears. High places matter too. Crete has peaks, and people went up to them. Peak sanctuaries, leaving offerings, marking the landscape with ritual. There is something ancient and universal about climbing to a high point at night. You go up, the air cools, the world goes quiet, and your problems shrink into the dark below. You look outward and upward. You feel the same sky the Shang watchers felt, the same repeating lights. The sea glows faintly on one side, the land falls away on the other, and in that wide view, you can sense why humans keep building meaning onto nature. Nature is too large to ignore. The frescoes keep following you as you move, and they start to feel like a gallery of what this culture liked to notice. Lilies, saffron crocuses, flowing water, birds, bright patterns that mimic the motion of waves. Saffron, especially, carries a quiet kind of luxury. Harvesting it is delicate work, tiny threads collected carefully, one bloom at a time. It's used as dye, scent, and valuable trade good. The idea of someone leaning over flowers in a calm field, picking something that will travel across seas and end up coloring cloth or flavoring food, is strangely soothing. It's a reminder that magnificence can begin with patience and small hands. You can also feel how later stories grow around this place, like vines climbing a wall. The labyrinth myth, the Minotaur, the idea that a palace so complex must have been a maze. Myths don't arise from nothing. They feed on impressions. A sprawling multi-level complex with twisting corridors is exactly the sort of architecture that invites a story about getting lost. Add bulls and ritual and the human appetite for drama, and you get a legend that echoes long after the original people are gone. The calm part is knowing that even myths are a kind of memory storage. They keep a place alive in the imagination. They keep questions alive, too. What did the ceremonies mean? Who held authority here? How did trade shape identity? What did they call themselves in their own language? The answers are partially hidden, and that makes the night feel gently mysterious rather than fully explained. Your mind can rest in that space. And then, because the world refuses to stay perfectly stable, a deeper hush moves under the Minoan beauty. The Aegean sits in a restless geological region. Earthquakes happen. The sea can change. On a nearby island, Thera, Santorini, will one day erupt with a force that becomes part of the region's long memory, sending shockwaves through trade and coastlines. The exact chain of cause and consequence is complex, and you don't need the sharp edges of disaster to feel the point. Even a graceful, sea-linked world has vulnerabilities it cannot paint over. Yet in this moment of your drift, the palace still holds its color. The dolphins still swim across plaster walls. The oil lamps still glow without hurrying. The harbor still breathes in and out with the tide. People still move through courtyards with practiced steps, passing jars, adjusting ropes, carrying offerings, laughing softly in ways that don't survive on tablets but survive in the imagination. Your thoughts ease into the simplest, most calming summary without becoming a summary at all. This civilization built comfort into beauty. It decorated the inside world with the outside world. It organized storage like a promise. It handled water like a trusted tool. It left writing that still won't translate itself, as if it enjoys watching modern scholars sweat a little. And the sea keeps the whole scene moving forward. Routes extend north and east, toward lands where kings are very fond of treaties and rules, where archives hold not just grain rations or ritual questions, but careful diplomatic agreements meant to keep empires from chewing each other apart. The air ahead tastes less like salt and more like dust again, the kind of dust that belongs to roads and borders and negotiations spoken in low, serious voices. The sea air thins out as you move inland, and the softness of painted dolphins gives way to a landscape that feels more guarded by nature itself. The ground rises into Anatolian highlands where nights cool quickly, where wind slips between rocks and carries the smell of dry grass and distant smoke. The darkness here has a different personality, less coastal openness, more tucked-away valleys and steep ridges that make you feel watched by the land, not by people. A city appears ahead, not glittering, not theatrical, but solid in that deeply reassuring way. Hattusa sits behind strong walls that follow the contours of the hills, like someone traced the terrain with a careful finger and decided to build exactly along the line that made sense. The gates are serious, stone lions, stone figures meant to announce, without shouting, that this place is not interested in surprises. You can almost hear the echo your footsteps would make if you passed through, the sound of entering a space where rules matter. The calm in the Hittite world comes from something most people claim to hate and secretly crave: bureaucracy. This is a civilization that puts comfort into categories and seals it with official stamps. If Uruk soothed you with the first quiet miracle of receipts, and the Shang soothed you with questions turned into bone and certainty, Hattusa offers a heavier blanket: the idea that conflict, trade, loyalty, and even fear can be shaped into documents. It's not romantic in the obvious way. It's romantic in the way a locked door is romantic when you're finally trying to sleep. Inside the city, the night is controlled. Fires burn where they're supposed to. Watchmen call to one another at intervals, their voices low, more routine than alarm. Somewhere a dog decides it has feelings about a passing shadow, and everyone ignores it because everyone knows that dog. Familiarity, again, doing the quiet work of safety. The most important building in your mind isn't a temple glowing with frescoes. It's an archive, a place where clay tablets rest in stacks, where shelves hold the weight of agreements, and where scribes, always the scribes, press signs into soft clay with the same patient wrists you've already met in Uruk. The script is cuneiform, the same wedge-shaped logic traveling across regions and centuries, adapted for different languages the way a good tool gets borrowed and customized. You can picture a scribe in lamplight, posture straight, eyes half narrowed, not angry, just focused. The tablet in front of them isn't an epic. It's a treaty, its obligations spelled out so clearly that the future can't pretend it misunderstood the past. And if you've ever tried to resolve a conflict with someone who thrives on, I don't remember saying that, you can feel why this is soothing. The Hittites were big on treaties, not as an occasional flourish, but as a core technology of empire. They ruled across a complicated landscape of city-states, vassals, rivals, and uneasy neighbors, and they found something more stable than constant fighting: paperwork backed by authority. The deal is written. The gods are invoked as witnesses. The terms are listed. The consequences are spelled out. Everyone knows what happens if someone breaks the agreement. It's not that violence disappears. Humans remain humans. But the existence of a treaty means the ideal is order. It means there's a preference for predictability over chaos. And predictability is one of the most sleep-friendly concepts ever invented. The clauses feel almost modern in spirit. Support your overlord in war. Do not ally with the enemy. Return fugitives. Pay tribute. Maintain borders. Inform us if you hear plots. Harsh, yes, but also clear. Clear is comforting. Clear means the mind doesn't have to guess what reality expects. Some treaties are between kings and vassals, asymmetric and stern. Others are between major powers, thick with formality and pride. One of the most famous peace agreements in the ancient world came after the Battle of Kadesh, involving the Hittites and Egypt, two giants deciding that endless rivalry was exhausting and expensive. The agreement is recorded in multiple versions, with the sense that both sides wanted the world to know this is settled officially with words. If Egypt gave you the calm of ritual order, it's strangely satisfying to see Egypt here again in a different mood. Less incense, more legal language. Your mind drifts over the scene of envoys arriving in Hattusa. You can imagine the quiet tension of diplomacy without needing swords drawn. Horses breathe in the cold night air, their breath visible like soft smoke. Messengers carry sealed tablets. Gifts are presented because humans rarely negotiate without also performing respect. There's a rhythm to it. Arrival, formal greetings, exchange, discussion, drafting, sealing, swearing. Sealing is important. A treaty without a seal is just a strong opinion. A seal is identity pressed into clay, the same principle you saw earlier in Uruk cylinder seals. The Hittite version carries its own authority. Royal names, symbols, sometimes images that connect the human king to divine approval. It's a reminder that paperwork is never only paperwork. It's backed by belief, by power, by the social agreement that certain marks mean certain consequences. The gods show up in these documents the way a witness shows up in a courtroom. Storm gods, sun goddesses, the forces that rule weather and seasons and therefore rule food. Invoking them isn't just theater. In an agricultural world, weather is the largest unpredictable variable. A storm god is basically the ancient version of saying, this contract is enforced by the biggest system we can name. You can feel that in the air here. Anatolia's weather is not the steady Nile schedule. It can be cold, windy, sharp. Storms come fast. So a storm god feels very real, very present, like a supervisor with a temper. That belief shapes daily life into routines designed to stay on the right side of the sky. The city itself is laid out with the same quiet competence you've been noticing across civilizations, but in a highland flavor. Fortifications curve with the hills. Gates channel movement. Inside, streets lead to administrative buildings, storage, temples. This is a capital that expects to manage a realm larger than what you can see from its walls. Management requires records. Records require scribes. Scribes require a steady supply of clay tablets and the institutional habit of keeping them safe. And they did keep them safe, at least long enough for their stacks to survive in fragments that later people would dig up and read, like eavesdropping on an empire's internal email. You can almost feel the comfort of the archive room. Thick walls, steady temperature, quiet shelves. The outside world can rage, but inside the tablets stay calm, waiting. The Hittites were multilingual and cosmopolitan in a way that feels surprisingly modern. Their archives include texts in multiple languages from across their world, diplomatic correspondence, rituals, myths, legal decisions. It's another soothing fact. Empires don't run on one voice. They run on translation, on people trained to listen carefully. Someone had to understand the other side well enough to keep things stable. There's gentle humor in that, too. Imagine the ancient equivalent of a translator thinking, yes, I know what he said, and yes, I know what he meant, and no, those are not the same thing. Diplomacy has always needed that kind of person. Hattusa at night has a particular sound. Wind, distant footsteps, a low murmur from a building where someone is still awake reading by lamplight because the draft has to be finished before the messenger leaves at dawn. The messenger system itself becomes part of the comfort. Roads connect the realm. Couriers move messages. Information travels faster than rumor. A centralized state is, at its best, an engine for reducing uncertainty. If your mind tries to worry, it can borrow the Hittite method. Put the worry into a clause. Define the boundary. Name the obligation. Specify the response. Your thoughts don't need to float around like fog. They can become structured, then set aside like a tablet placed on a shelf. The legal mindset goes deeper than diplomacy. Hittite laws and administrative practices show an interest in procedure, how disputes are handled, how compensation works, how property and labor are managed. Compared to the image many people have of ancient societies as constantly brutal, it's calming to encounter a system that often leans toward fines and restitution rather than automatic extremes. Not gentle by modern standards, no need to pretend, but recognizable as governance rather than pure intimidation. Daily life sits beneath the treaties the way bread sits beneath pyramids. In the evening, households manage food and fuel. Grain is ground, stews simmer, wool is spun, people keep warm. You can imagine woven textiles, thick cloaks, the scratch of wool against skin, the relief of stepping near a fire. The smell is wood smoke and cooked grain, not incense-heavy ceremony every hour. The sacred exists, but the domestic keeps the heart beating. Horses matter here, too. The Hittites are associated with chariot warfare in the broader region's memory, but the calmer truth is that horses represent mobility and status, and caring for them is daily routine. Feed, brush, check hooves, keep tack in order. It's the same theme again, maintenance as civilization. The glamorous history books talk about battles. The actual life is people doing repetitive care, so the system doesn't collapse. Metal shows up in the background quietly. The Hittite world sits in a broader late Bronze Age network where copper and tin become bronze, and where iron begins to appear as an object of interest and prestige long before it becomes everyday material. Iron at this stage can be rare and valued, sometimes treated almost like a special substance rather than the commonplace metal it becomes later. The idea is soothing in a strange way. Materials themselves have histories, and humans keep experimenting, not always to conquer, sometimes simply to improve tools, to sharpen a blade, to make farming a little easier. You can feel the empire's grandeur without being forced to stare at a single monument. It's a grandeur made of connections, roads, envoys, archives, and a sheer administrative effort of holding many regions together. It's the difference between a dramatic performance and a well-run backstage crew. The Hittites are backstage excellence. The show goes on because the paperwork is correct, and yet mystery keeps its place. For all the tablets and treaties, the human moments remain partly hidden. The look on a scribe's face when a king demands a rewrite, the relief when a peace deal finally settles, the private jokes among messengers who have walked the same road too many times, the small prayers whispered before a storm. Those details don't always make it into official records, and that's fine. Night is allowed to keep some privacy. The air cools further. Somewhere beyond the walls, wolves or distant dogs call out across the hills, turning the landscape into a living presence. Inside the city, the archive remains still. Tablets rest like sleeping thoughts. Treaties sit stacked, calm, heavy promises that say, in their own ancient way, tomorrow has a plan. The comfort of rules doesn't mean the world is soft. It means the world is shaped. It means uncertainty is given edges, written down, sealed, and witnessed. Your mind can borrow that shape for a few minutes. The day's loose ends don't have to keep flapping in the dark. They can be pressed into clay and set on a shelf you don't have to open tonight. As the last lamplight in the archive dims, the Empire's roads stretch outward in your imagination, pulling you toward coastlines again, toward sailors whose greatest invention isn't a wall or a treaty, but a small set of letters that makes language travel lighter and faster. An alphabet born from trade, meant to be carried like a quiet tool in a pocket. The roads that leave Atusa don't feel like casual paths. They feel like decisions, worn into the land by feet, hooves, and the steady duty of messengers who didn't get to work from home. As those roads slope down toward the coast, the air changes again. The highland chill loosens. The wind carries salt. The darkness opens up, because the sea always makes night feel wider, as if the horizon quietly refuses to be fenced. A harbor appears the way warm light appears under a door. You don't see the whole city at first. You see movement. Lanterns bobbing on docks. Shadows of masts. The soft percussion of waves against stone. Rope creaks and what complains in that familiar, tired way the sound ships make when they've been holding themselves together all day and would like a break. This is where the Phoenician world feels most at home. On the edge between land and water, where trade becomes habit and the sea becomes a road you can't pave but can learn to read. The mood is different from river civilizations. A river gives you direction whether you ask for it or not. The sea offers direction only if you know how to interpret the sky, the wind, the currents, the shape of a coastline in dim light. It's less forgiving, which makes competence here feel like its own kind of elegance. The people moving along the docks aren't trying to look mysterious. They're trying to get things done before the tide or the weather changes its mind. Cargo gets shifted, amphorae sealed with pitch, bundles of textiles wrapped tight, ingots of metal, sacks of grain, jars of oil. The smell is layered. Salt, fish, tar, smoke, crushed herbs, and somewhere behind it all, the clean, sharp scent of cedar wood. Cedar has a way of smelling like permanence, like a forest that knows it's valuable. That cedar matters. These coasts are connected to mountains where cedars grow, and Phoenician shipbuilding leans into that strength the way Uruk leaned into clay and Egypt leaned into papyrus reeds. Every civilization takes what the land offers and turns it into a superpower. Here, the superpower is timber, skilled hands, and a stubborn relationship with the sea. A ship sits moored in the darkness, its hull dark against darker water. You can picture the curve of it, built to ride waves instead of fighting them. The mast rises like a quiet tower, and the rigging makes a soft lattice of lines against the stars. Someone checks knots with fingers that don't need lamplight to know whether the tension is right. There's a calm in that kind of muscle memory. It's the same calm you saw in the Indus brick standards and Hittite treaty clauses. Competence repeated until it becomes second nature. The sea is their archive, their marketplace, their map. And because the sea connects rather than encloses, Phoenician life becomes an ongoing conversation with other cultures. Ports are where languages bump shoulders, where goods carry stories, where a jar of oil can become a friendship or an insult, depending on how it's priced. You can feel the rhythm of it, even in the late hours. Deals are made quietly. A merchant gestures with an open palm, not dramatic, just precise. A buyer leans in, inspecting a fabric by touch because eyes lie and hands don't. Someone laughs softly at a joke you don't understand, and that's fine. You're not here to decode every word. You're here to let the atmosphere work on you. One of the most famous Phoenician products isn't loud until you imagine it. Purple dye. Tyrian purple, sometimes described like it's the ancient equivalent of bottling royalty. The color comes from sea snails, murex, processed in ways that are not particularly glamorous in smell, which is an understatement that should probably be carved into a stone monument somewhere. The dye workshops were not scented with lotus and incense. They were scented with marine biology meets regret. There's gentle sarcasm hiding in that fact, because humans will endure a shocking amount of unpleasantness for status. Egypt had perfumes and oils and that infamous crocodile dung sunscreen detail that still makes modern people flinch. Here, a city can smell like a dye vat, and people still think, yes, this is worth it because the cloth comes out purple and purple means power. At night, though, you don't have to stand in the dye workshop. You can simply see the results. A strip of fabric catching lamplight, dark and rich, the color absorbing light rather than reflecting it. A garment folded carefully, guarded like wealth because it is wealth. A merchant's fingers smoothing it once, slow, affectionate, the way a person touches something that took a lot of risk and distance to acquire. Distance is the key word. Phoenicians were sailors, traders, and colonizers in the sense of establishing outposts and cities along coasts, building a network of ports that made the sea feel navigable and familiar. The sea becomes less like an abyss and more like a chain of stepping stones, each harbor a place to rest, trade, repair, gather news. It's the kind of network that changes the human sense of space. The world gets bigger and also smaller because you can move through it with confidence. Confidence at sea depends on the sky. You lift your gaze and see the stars the way they would, bright, detailed, reliable. The constellations aren't just pretty, they're guidance. The North Star region, the slow pivot of the night, the seasonal shift in what rises and when. Sailors learn patterns until the sky feels like a familiar ceiling, not a mystery. It's the same comfort you felt on Uruk's ziggurat and under Egypt's mirrored Nile. Except here, the sky isn't simply watched, it's used. You can imagine a captain in the quiet hours, standing near the stern, eyes narrowed against wind, reading the sea's texture and the sky's placement as if both are texts. That thought ties back to everything you've already visited. Texts in clay, texts in papyrus, texts in bone cracks, texts in treaty lines. Humans keep turning the world into something readable because readability is survival. And then you arrive at the Phoenicians' most quietly world-changing invention. Not a ship, not a die, not a luxury jar sealed with pitch, but a set of letters. It happens in a way that feels almost humble. Writing existed long before. Uruk's cuneiform, Egypt's hieroglyphs, the still mysterious scripts of the Indus and Minoan worlds. Those systems can be powerful and beautiful, but they often require long training. Many signs, many rules, a lot of memorization. That's fine for scribal classes in temples and palaces. But trade wants something lighter. Trade wants speed. Trade wants a system that can travel with merchants and sailors without demanding a lifetime of schooling first. So the Phoenician approach simplifies. It turns writing into a compact toolkit, a small set of symbols, each tied closely to a sound. You don't need hundreds of signs to record goods and names. You need enough signs to represent speech efficiently. The result is an alphabetic system, an ancestor to many later alphabets, that spreads not because it's sacred or imperial, but because it's useful. Useful is contagious. Picture a merchant in lamplight scratching marks onto a surface. Maybe ink on papyrus, maybe carving on wood, maybe pressing in a wax. The marks aren't ornate. They're clean. They're fast. They say, in a very calm way, this many jars, this kind of oil, this buyer, this price, this debt, this date, the same old human needs, suddenly made more portable. There's something soothing about that portability. It means memory doesn't have to stay locked in palaces. It can move. It can belong to the people who move goods and ideas across water. It democratizes record keeping in the most practical sense. More people can learn it. More people can use it. More people can trust it. And trust is the hidden engine of trade. You can't always travel with your goods. You sometimes send them ahead. You can't always watch the payment happen. You rely on marks, seals, reputations, and systems that make cheating harder. Phoenician writing becomes part of that trust network, a quiet technology that makes long-distance exchange less like gambling. You can almost feel how the alphabet changes a harbor's atmosphere. Messages become shorter, clearer. Labels become consistent. Names can be written down without needing a trained temple scribe to interpret them. A sailor can recognize his own name, scratched into a beam, and that alone is a psychological shift. Identity made visible in a repeatable form. The visual of it is calming, too. Simple signs, repeated tidy. Your mind likes tidy. You walk past a small room near the docks where someone is counting goods. The room smells of cedar, shavings, and oil. A lamp burns low. The person counting pauses to wet the tip of a reed pen, then continues. The scratching sound is soft, almost rhythmic. It's the kind of sound that could put you to sleep if you weren't already halfway there. Outside, the sea keeps breathing. A ship is preparing to leave at dawn, because winds can be more cooperative in the early hours. Sailors check provisions. Water jars, dried food, ropes, spare wood. Nothing about this is glamorous, and everything about it is necessary. Again, the theme returns. Maintenance is civilization. A ship is a floating system. If one part fails, everything suffers. So people become methodical. Methodical becomes calming. There's also a quiet courage in this world that doesn't need speeches. Imagine stepping onto a ship knowing the sea can turn on you without warning. Imagine doing it anyway, because your livelihood depends on it, because your culture is built on it, because the horizon is not a threat but an invitation. That courage isn't the adrenaline kind. It's the steady kind. The kind that comes from competence, from having done this before, from knowing where the nearest safe harbor is, from trusting your crew and your knots and your stars. Somewhere in the harbor, a child watches the ships with wide eyes. Maybe they'll become a sailor, maybe a merchant, maybe a shipbuilder, maybe someone who learns the new writing marks and uses them to keep accounts. That quiet possibility, skills passing forward, feels like the real magnificence. Not a single monument, a tradition of movement and adaptation. And the Phoenician network isn't only about goods. It's about the way ideas hop across water, a technique in metallurgy, a style in pottery, a recipe for preserving fish, a way to build a stronger hull, a new set of letters. The sea carries these the way a river carries silt, depositing them in different places, reshaping cultures slowly, subtly, without asking for permission. You can feel that reshaping beginning, like a tide pulling at the edges of the next worlds. The alphabet travels to people who will adapt it, reshape it, add signs, change sounds, eventually building their own systems upon it. You don't have to follow that whole lineage tonight. The calm isn't a moment of invention and spread, a small set of symbols that can cross the sea in a merchant's pocket, light enough to survive storms. A last glance at the docks shows lanterns reflecting in the water like scattered coins. The smells soften as the night deepens. The harbor's voices fade. The ships settle into stillness, creaking gently. Somewhere behind you, a trader closes a ledger, sets it aside, and finally allows sleep to arrive, trusting that the marks he made will still mean the same thing in the morning. That trust in systems, in symbols, in routes, in agreements, connects everything you visited so far. Clay tablets in Uruk, papyrus lists along the Nile, standard bricks in the Indus cities, oracle cracks in Shangbone, painted dolphins in Minoan halls, Hittite treaties sealed in archives, Phoenician letters carried over water, all different, all aiming at the same quiet goal: make the world readable enough that a human being can rest. And on the far edge of this sea-linked network, the map's attention begins to drift south again, toward a long river corridor where gold roads and desert winds shape a kingdom that stands tall beside Egypt, not as a shadow, but as its own steady light. The lantern reflections in the harbor water keep shimmering behind your eyelids for a moment, like the sea is still counting coins. Then the coastline loosens its grip and the world tilts back toward river light. The air warms in a different way, less salty, more earthy, and a map carries you south along the same long corridor that once made Egypt feel inevitable. Only this time the story doesn't stop at Egypt's temples and pyramids. The river keeps going, stubborn and calm, through rockier stretches and tighter bends, into lands that were never simply Egypt's neighbor, no matter how often history gets told like a one-way street. The Nile narrows and toughens as it moves upriver. The easy, wide floodplain becomes interrupted by cataracts, sections where rocks and rapids break the smooth flow. These aren't just geographic details, they're personality. They make travel slower, more deliberate. They force boats to pause, unload, portage, negotiate with the river instead of gliding over it. And negotiation does something quietly powerful. It creates choke points, and choke points create cities, and cities create kingdoms that learn to stand on their own. You're in Nubia now, the broad region south of Egypt, and within it, Kush rises as a name that carries weight, sometimes as a trade partner, sometimes as a rival, often as both, because human relationships love complexity more than they love clean narratives. The mood here feels different from Egypt's polished stone certainty. It's a little more desert wind, a little more gold dust, a little more distance between settlements, and yet the river still makes everything possible. The Nile is still the spine. The difference is the landscape around it, tougher, drier, more dramatic in silhouette. Night falls across this stretch of the river with a deep quiet. Stars look sharper here, the sky darker. The desert doesn't glow with city light, it absorbs light. Small fires near the riverbank become precious points, and you can imagine people clustering close, speaking low, listening for the river's sound to tell them what the rocks are doing. The first thing that makes Kush feel magnificent is trade, not as a buzzword, but as a lived reality. Goods move through these lands like a slow pulse. Gold is part of it, and not the symbolic gold people mention in poems. Real gold, dust and nuggets pulled from the earth, washed, sorted, guarded. Kush becomes associated with wealth in the ancient imagination partly because the region had access to gold sources and controlled routes that mattered. Gold is light that doesn't go out, and civilizations love that. But it's never only gold. Think of the caravan rhythm. Ivory, ebony, animal skins, incense, exotic woods, ostrich feathers, cattle, and all the quietly essential basics: grain, beer, tools, textiles, pottery. A trade network is less about luxury and more about stability. When regions exchange goods, famine in one place can be softened by surplus in another. Skills spread, ideas travel, even small improvements: how to fire pottery, how to shape metal, how to build a boat to handle rapids, move like whispers along routes. You can picture a river port in the evening, calmer than a sea harbor, more intimate. Boats sit low in the water, loaded carefully. Someone checks lashings with tired hands. A merchant counts jars the same way a Phoenician counted amphorae, just with a different accent and a different sky. The sound of counting is universal, and it's still strangely soothing, a mind turning uncertainty into a number. Kush has phases like most long-lived cultures. Earlier on, Kerma becomes one of the major centers, a city and kingdom that grows with its own identity. Kerma's power isn't built as an imitation of Egypt. It's built around local strength, control of trade routes, skilled craft production, and a relationship with the river that's both practical and spiritual. Kerma's monumental architecture includes large mud brick structures, sometimes called defyufas, solid, towering forms that look like the earth itself decided to stand up. In moonlight, a massive mud brick monument feels different from stone. Stone declares permanence loudly. Mud brick declares it quietly, almost defiantly. This holds because people keep it holding. That maintenance theme returns again, steady as breath. People repair walls, rebuild structures, keep routes open, keep cattle herds healthy, keep storage organized. The Empire stories love dramatic kings. The real continuity is workers, farmers, craft specialists, boatmen. The calm kings, if you want to call them that, are the ones who understand that stability is a craft. Move forward in time, and the center of gravity shifts to places like Nepeta near a striking natural landmark. Jebel Barkal, a mountain that rises from the desert with a shape that looks intentional, like a symbol carved by geology. Cultures across the Nile Valley often treat distinctive natural features as sacred because nature already looks like meaning. Jebel Barkal becomes linked with ammonious worship, and temples grow around it. The atmosphere there is part desert stillness, part ritual order, part political authority, because religion and governance tend to share a roof in ancient worlds. In the night air near a temple, you can smell incense and dust. You can hear soft footfalls on stone. Ritual offers the same comfort it offered in Egypt. A repeated sequence that says the world is held together by habit. Offerings are made. Words are spoken in the right order. Lamps burn steadily. The point is less about spectacle and more about reassurance. Reassurance for the community, for the ruler, for the anxious human mind trying to live alongside floods and drought and unpredictable neighbors. And then, on the horizon, pyramids appear again, smaller, steeper, clustered in ways that look almost like a field of stone arrows pointing into the sky. This is one of the most quietly startling facts for many people. Kush has pyramids too, and lots of them. The Kushite pyramids, especially at places like Meroe, are distinct from Egypt's. More narrow, often with sharper angles, often built in groups that make a skyline of repeated geometry. In starlight, the repetition becomes hypnotic, like a patterned quilt laid over sand. It's easy to imagine walking through that cemetery at night. The sand cool underfoot, the air dry and crisp, the silhouettes of pyramids cutting into the dark. No need for drama. The grandeur is already there, and the mind, always looking for narrative, can't help but compare. Egypt's pyramids spread out like singular statements. Kush's pyramids gather like a chorus. Kush also steps into Egypt's story in a way that flips the usual direction. There's a period when Kushite rulers from the south become powerful enough to rule Egypt as well, often referred to as Egypt's 25th dynasty. However you frame it, conquest, reunification, expansion, it carries a satisfying sense of reversal for anyone tired of hearing history told from one side only. The river is not a one-way pipeline of influence. Culture flows both ways. Power can rise from the south and move north. Ideas and styles can travel upriver, just as goods do. This matters for the mood tonight because it deepens the mystery. Kush is not a footnote. It's a parallel civilization with its own choices, its own aesthetics, its own political strategies, and its own way of making meaning. It also shows how ancient worlds were interconnected enough that identity could be both local and expansive, proudly Nubian and confidently imperial when circumstances allowed. Further along the timeline, Meroe becomes a major center, and the atmosphere changes again. The land around Meroe supports agriculture in a different rhythm, and the kingdom's position becomes strategic for trade between the Nile Valley and routes reaching toward the Red Sea and deeper into Africa. When a place sits on multiple pathways, it becomes a hub almost automatically. Goods arrive, people arrive, languages overlap, skills gather. One of the most interesting, slightly smoky details about Meroe is iron. The region becomes known for iron production, with archaeological evidence suggesting large-scale ironworking. You can picture the night glow of furnaces again, different from Shang bronze, different from Hittite metalworking, but sharing that same ancient pattern. Fire controlled, material transformed, labor organized. Ironworking can leave behind slag mounds, the quiet waste of industry, like fossilized proof that people were busy reshaping the world. The presence of iron adds another layer to the kingdom's strength. Tools become tougher, weapons shift, farming implements can improve. The ability to work iron is an advantage that sits under daily life like an unseen foundation. Most people don't wake up thinking, I appreciate metallurgy. They wake up thinking, I need to plant, or I need to build, or I need to fix. Iron is the helper that doesn't ask for attention. Writing appears here too, in its own mysterious form. The Meroitic script exists, signs that can be read aloud in terms of sounds, but whose full language understanding is still incomplete in many respects compared to better documented tongues. It carries the same soothing quality as the undeciphered scripts you've already met. Indicials that refuse to translate, linear A that stays private. Mystery becomes a feature, not a flaw. It keeps the night gentle. Not everything has to be solved. Some voices remain partly behind a veil. You can imagine a scribe in Meroe carving or painting signs, knowing exactly what they mean, while you, centuries later, only catch the outline of that meaning. That gap is strangely calming. It makes the past feel alive rather than fully cataloged. A fully solved past can feel like a museum label. A partly unknown past feels like a night landscape, shaped enough to walk through, shadowed enough to keep your curiosity warm. The people here also develop a reputation for archery. Kushite archers appear in various historical contexts, and the idea fits the landscape. Open spaces, long sight lines, and a culture where skill with distance matters. Archery is an oddly meditative craft if you think about it. Breathing, focus, release, a discipline built on stillness. Even the martial parts of ancient life can contain calm when they're framed as practiced skill rather than chaos. And then there are the queens, often referred to by the title Candake, or Candace in older renderings, women who hold significant power in certain Kushite periods. The presence of powerful royal women in the political landscape adds texture to the story. It suggests governance that doesn't always match the narrower stereotypes people carry about ancient worlds. It also fits the broader theme tonight. Civilizations are complicated. Their social structures can surprise you. The past isn't a single template. Picture a royal court in lamplight, not a roaring, decadent scene. More controlled, more deliberate. Advisors speaking carefully. messengers arriving from trade routes, religious officials watching for omens and calendar markers, a ruler listening, weighing, deciding. The calm king image becomes calm ruler, because stability is what keeps trade flowing and harvests organized. Rulers who understand that tend to live longer politically, even if history books prefer the loud ones. The landscape itself becomes part of the lullaby. The desert near the Nile can feel like an ocean of sand, still, vast, indifferent. At night, the temperature drops, and the air becomes crisp enough that every breath feels clean. The river cuts through that dryness like a living ribbon, proof that life can persist in harsh surroundings when it's organized around water. That contrast, dry darkness and moving water, creates a sense of quiet magic. The Nile doesn't sparkle loudly. It simply continues. A boat pushes upstream slowly, maybe with poles, maybe with tow lines along the bank in certain stretches. The work is steady. No hurry. Haste doesn't help against current and rocks. The boatman's patience becomes your patience. The mind relaxes when it stops trying to force speed into places where speed never belonged. The pyramids remain on the horizon like a repeating thought. The temples near Jebel Barkal hold their quiet gravity. The furnaces of Meroe glow like low stars on land. Trade routes hum softly in the background, moving gold and goods, moving stories and skills. The kingdom's identity feels both rooted and expansive, shaped by the river and by the wide worlds connected through it. And the calm, truly, is in how Kush sits beside Egypt without dissolving into it. The story of ancient civilizations becomes more restful when it stops pretending there's only one main character. The Nile Valley is a long conversation, not a monologue. Kush speaks in its own accent, through clustered pyramids, through iron and trade, through sacred mountains, through queens and rulers who understood the value of order. The river keeps moving north and south in your mind at the same time, linking places you've already visited and places still waiting ahead. And somewhere beyond the desert and river bends, roads begin to straighten again, stretching across a vast empire where couriers run like clockwork and gardens are designed to feel like paradise made practical. The river conversation fades behind you, and the land stretches wider, drier, more open, as if the world has decided to stop curving around water and start curving around distance. The route ahead looks like it was drawn with a ruler, long, straight segments that don't care if you're tired. The air tastes of dust and sun-baked stone even at night, and the sky feels enormous because deserts and plateaus have a way of making you feel small without being cruel about it. You follow the idea of a road first, before you follow any single city. A road is a promise that someone has gone this way before you, and someone will go this way after you. And in between those two facts, you can relax just a little. The Persians understood that promise so well it became a kind of empire religion. Connect the realm, and the realm stays readable. This is where the Achaemenid world begins to hum. An empire that is too large to hold in one view, yet somehow still feels organized, like a vast room where everything has been labeled. The calm here doesn't come from a single monument or a single ritual. It comes from logistics. And yes, that sounds like the least romantic word you could bring to bedtime, which is exactly why it works. The royal road becomes the main thread you're holding. Not a mystical path, not a poetic metaphor. An actual long-distance route linking key regions of the empire, built and maintained so messages and officials can move with speed that feels almost impossible for the ancient world. You picture it in the dark, packed earth or stone where available, measured distances, predictable stopping points. Not perfect everywhere because humans are humans and terrain is stubborn, but reliable enough that it changes the psychology of distance. Distance is a kind of anxiety. When you can't reach people quickly, you fear what happens beyond your sight. Empires collapse under that fear. The Persian solution is very simple and very powerful. Reduce distance by turning it into steps. Along the road, the most soothing figure appears, the courier, or a rider moving through the night with the kind of focus that doesn't waste energy. Their horses' hooves land in a steady rhythm, and the sound becomes a metronome for your breathing. The courier isn't carrying gold or silk tonight. They're carrying something more valuable, information sealed into authority. There's a system behind that rider, and the system is the real marvel. Relay stations spaced along the route. Fresh horses waiting. Food, water, shelter. A place to sleep briefly, to warm hands, to switch mounts, to keep moving. You can feel how this would make an empire feel smaller from the inside. If a king's orders can travel quickly, if reports can return quickly, then chaos has less time to grow in the dark. The Greeks later talk about this courier network with a kind of awe, describing how nothing stops these messengers. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night. It's flattering, almost mythic, and also deeply practical. A message delayed can become a rebellion. A message delivered on time can become a harvest saved, a border defended, a conflict cooled before it boils. You can almost hear the small sounds of the relay station at night. A door opening, a breath of warm air, the low clink of tack, the soft murmur of someone checking a seal. The courier's voice is brief because this isn't story time. It's information time. Someone records the arrival, maybe on a tablet, maybe on parchment-like materials, maybe in a ledger that's more memory than paper. Someone nods, offers water, points to the fresh horse. The courier swings back into motion. It has the comforting efficiency of an airport that actually works, which is a fantasy so soothing it might be illegal. The empire itself is arranged like a set of compartments. Satrapies, administrative regions, each with local governance under imperial oversight, each feeding resources and loyalty into a larger structure. The arrangement isn't gentle, governance rarely is, but it is legible. Legibility is what keeps your mind from spiraling. When rules are known and routes are established, you can predict the shape of tomorrow. That predictability shows up even in the way taxes and tribute are handled. Resources move towards centers. Goods are measured. Records are kept. You're back with scribes again, of course. Scribes are the quiet species that never goes extinct in civilization. They just change outfits and writing materials and continue doing the same sacred task, turning reality into a document. In Persia, the administrative language of the empire often uses Aramaic for practical paperwork across vast distances because empires love a lingua franca. It's another relaxing truth. Large systems survive by being flexible. They don't insist everyone be identical. They insist everyone be understandable. And because humans like symbols, the empire also has its visible statements. The great ceremonial complex of Persepolis rises in your imagination, not as a place of daily bureaucracy, but as a place of display. Columns like stone forests, carved stairways where delegations are shown bringing gifts, textiles, animals, vessels, precious materials. The carvings are calm in their own way. They show order. They show procession. They show a world where people move in line, where offerings are carried with both hands, where the empire imagines itself as harmony rather than chaos. It's propaganda, sure, but it's soothing propaganda. It's the kind that says everything is under control, which is what your nervous system wishes it could text you at midnight. In the lamplight of a distant hall, you picture the surfaces, stone cool underhand, air moving between columns, shadows stretching long. A ceremonial space doesn't have to be loud to be grand. Grand can be quiet. Grand can be repetition. Column after column, relief after relief, a visual rhythm that tells your mind to stop darting around and settle in a pattern. Pattern is the empire's secret language. The road is pattern. The relay stations are pattern. The satrapies are pattern. The record keeping is pattern. Even the coinage becomes pattern, standardized forms that travel, turning exchange into something less like argument and more like routine. A gold derrick in the hand has a weight that says trust, in the same way a Phoenician alphabet mark says trust, in the same way a Hittite seal says trust. Humans keep inventing trust because trust lets you sleep. And then, because the Persian world understood something deeper than roads, you find yourself walking into a garden at night. A Persian garden isn't just plants arranged nicely. It's an idea, order imposed gently on harshness. In a dry landscape, a garden is not decoration. It's proof of control over water. The very concept later associated with paradise has roots in walled gardens, enclosed spaces where water is guided, shade is planned, fruit trees are placed deliberately, and the air becomes cooler than the world outside. You step into that space in your mind and feel an immediate shift. The wind softens. The scent changes, pomegranate, perhaps, or herbs crushed underfoot, or the faint sweetness of ripening fruit that's been protected from sun by careful canopy. Water moves through channels and straight lines, then turns at right angles, making gentle sounds as it passes stone edges. The sound is smaller than a river, more intimate. It's the sound of water being managed, not wild. That management depends on engineering that doesn't ask for applause. Canons. Underground channels that bring water from higher ground to settlements and fields, protecting it from evaporation under brutal sun. You don't have to picture the full tunnel system to feel the comfort of the idea. Water traveling in darkness, quietly, steadily, arriving where it's needed because someone planned for the long term. It's like the Indus drains, but inverted, water and life delivered instead of waste carried away. The same principle. Channel the world so it doesn't spill all over your mind. In the garden's darkness, you can imagine lamps placed low along paths, their flames sheltered from wind. Shadows of leaves move gently across stone. A figure walks slowly, maybe a caretaker, maybe a guard, maybe someone who simply needed quiet. The empire outside is huge and complicated. Inside the garden, it's reduced to a few perfect sensations. Cool air, soft water sounds, the scent of green life. The garden is the empire's lullaby to itself. It's also a political statement. If you can make a garden flourish, you can claim the right to rule. You can say, without shouting, we can keep things alive. Ancient power often tries to justify itself through fertility, fields, harvests, prosperity. The garden becomes a miniature kingdom where prosperity is visible. Your mind makes a small callback, the way it naturally does when it's winding down. Egypt's ritual order tied to the Nile's schedule. Indus planning tied to drains and wells. Minoan beauty tied to sea and color. Hittite stability tied to treaties. Phoenician connection tied to ships and letters. Kush's strength tied to trade and river choke points. Persia gathers the themes and tightens them into a system. Connect everything, record everything, move information fast, and build pockets of paradise to remind everyone what the system is for. Even the empire's tolerance, its pragmatic approach to local customs and religions in many contexts, fits into this logic. If you rule many peoples, you either crush them constantly, which is exhausting, or you let them keep their local rhythms while paying into the larger structure. The second option is calmer. Calmer tends to last longer. It's not purely kindness, it's strategy. But strategy can still be soothing when it reduces chaos. You return in your imagination to the royal road at night, leaving the garden's coolness behind. A courier approaches a station, lanterns appearing like low stars on land. The horse's breathing is steady. The rider's posture doesn't waste motion. They hand off the message, and the message keeps moving even as the rider pauses. The relay continues. The empire breathes through these relays the way a body breathes through lungs. Inhale information, exhale orders, adjust, survive. There's a particular comfort in knowing the ancient world could be this organized. Not because organization is always good, but because organization is proof that humans can cooperate at scale without everything collapsing into noise. If your mind has been loud today, this image gives it something smoother to hold. The road stretches onward, and you can sense it leading toward new kinds of city life, toward places where public speech becomes an art, where questions are asked under colonnades, where the politics feel like a theater and the theater feels like politics, all under the shade of olive trees. The courier's hoofbeats fade into that direction, steady and patient, as if the empire is handing you off to a different style of magnificence. The courier's hoofbeats from the Persian road fade into a different rhythm, softer underfoot, because the ground changes from imperial highways to stony paths that smell faintly of wild herbs when you step on them. The air carries the Aegean again. Salt, yes, but also something sharper, like sun-baked rock finally cooling after a long day. A line of olive trees stands dark against the sky, their leaves catching the smallest hint of moonlight and flashing it back in tiny silver flickers, as if the trees are quietly applauding the night for showing up on time. You move toward a city that doesn't feel like it was designed by one mind in one grand plan. It feels like it grew the way conversations grow, one corner at a time, one argument at a time, one compromise at a time. Athens settles into view, not as a single silhouette like a pyramid, but as layers, low houses, narrow streets, scattered lamps, and then the Acropolis rising above it all like a calm stone crown. The first relaxing fact is how much the Greek world depends on small, repeatable things. Olive oil isn't a luxury here, it's a daily solution. It lights lamps, flavors food, softens skin, keeps tools from rusting too quickly, and probably solves a few social problems simply by making everything taste better. The smell of it in the kitchen at night, warm, green, faintly peppery, feels like a domestic anchor. You don't need an empire to be impressive. You need a lamp that stays lit and a meal that shows up. In the streets below the Acropolis, the city is quieter than you might expect. You've heard about Athens as a place of loud voices, debates, speeches, drama, and yes, it can be all of that. But at night, it becomes a place of soft footfalls and low conversation. A dog turns in a doorway and decides the world is fine. Someone closes a wooden shutter. Someone drags a stool inside with a scrape that sounds louder than it is because the night amplifies small things. The Acropolis above you holds its own kind of silence. Temples don't roar, they wait. Stone steps cool quickly, and when you imagine your hand brushing a column base, it feels smooth in the way that comes from countless touches over time. That smoothness is a form of memory too, less like a clay tablet on a shelf, and more like a path worn into permanence. The Greeks are very good at making geometry feel soothing. Columns rise in repeating patterns, and the repetition is the point. Your mind likes repetition because it suggests predictability. Doric columns feel grounded and sturdy, like someone decided elegance should still be able to lift weights. Ionic columns add a touch more delicacy, with scroll-like capitals that look like stone trying to curl itself into a soft gesture. The distinctions aren't just aesthetic, they're a cultural language. Even architecture becomes a way to think. Thinking is what the Greek world turns into a kind of sport. You can sense it in the way the city's public spaces are arranged. The agora, the marketplace, doesn't only trade goods. It trades words. In daylight, it's a place of bargaining and gossip and daily necessities. At night, it becomes a memory of those interactions, a wide open space that holds the echo of voices even when nobody is speaking. And the voices matter, because one of Greece's most famous inventions isn't a monument. It's the idea that public speech can shape reality. Not perfectly, not fairly for everyone, not without constant friction. But the concept becomes powerful. Citizens gather, argue, vote, decide. It's both inspiring and, if you're honest, a little exhausting. Democracy is basically the ancient version of deciding to run your household by committee and then acting surprised when meetings take forever. Still, the civic structure does something deeply calming for the people included within it. It gives them a sense of agency. If you have a voice, the future feels less like a storm and more like a debate you can prepare for. Preparation is soothing. Even when the debates are messy, the existence of a process creates a kind of safety rail for society's nervous system. Processes also create paperwork. Yes, even here. Not as centralized as Persian archives, but present. Laws are written, Decrees are inscribed on stone. Public records exist. When a decision is carved into a slab and set up where people can see it, it becomes harder to pretend it never happened. The stone is the city's memory, blunt and unblinking. The Greek alphabet glows softly in the background of this scene, and it feels like a gentle continuation of the Phoenician letters you just left at the docks. The Greeks adapt those earlier signs, shift sounds, add vowels, and suddenly writing fits their language with a new ease. Vowels are a small invention with enormous consequences. They turn writing into something closer to speech, something that can capture nuance more cleanly. It's one of those quiet upgrades that makes human communication feel less like hauling clay tablets up a hill and more like passing a note across a table. That note passing becomes literature. Epics, poems, plays. And once you have plays, you have theaters, open-air spaces where the night air can carry voices without microphones, because the architecture itself is designed to help sound travel. Imagine sitting in a stone amphitheater under stars, the world dark around you, and hearing a single actor's words reach your seat with clarity. That clarity feels like magic, but it's engineering plus careful design, plus human understanding of space. The themes of the plays aren't always gentle. Humans write about what scares them, but the experience itself can be oddly soothing because it turns fear into story. Tragedy lets people stare at the darkest corners of life from the safe distance of performance. Comedy lets them release tension with laughter that doesn't solve problems but makes them lighter. Either way, the community shares the experience. Shared experience is one of the oldest sedatives. You wander mentally down a street and pass a house where a symposium is winding down. A symposium is part dinner, part drinking party, part intellectual performance, and part my friend will not stop talking about his theory session. The room is warm, lamps low, cushions arranged around the edges. Wine is diluted with water. Not because they didn't like strength, but because they understood that pure wine can turn a thoughtful evening into a chaotic one faster than anyone needs. Someone recites a line of poetry. Someone answers with a joke. Someone insists a philosophical point is obvious, which is always the first sign it isn't. The soothing part of symposium isn't the volume. It's the ritual. There are rules. How the wine is mixed, the order of toasts, the games, the conversation arcs. Humans love rules for social situations because rules reduce uncertainty. Without rules, you're constantly guessing what to do. With rules, you can relax into the flow. Even philosophy, which can feel like mental cardio, has a calming side when it's done slowly. Picture a teacher walking under a stoa, the covered walkway that frames the agora like a long stone shelter. The columns create a repeating pattern. Again, that gentle repetition, and the shade makes the air cooler. Students follow, listening, occasionally interrupting, because the Greeks are not shy about interrupting. The teacher asks questions instead of delivering final answers, because the goal is less here is the truth and more learn how to think. That method can be irritating in real life and soothing in bedtime imagination, because it suggests your mind isn't trapped. It can move. One of the commonest Greek ideas is surprisingly simple: moderation. Not as a moral lecture, but as a practical technique for living. Too much of anything becomes a problem. Too little becomes another problem. Balance becomes the goal. The phrase, "nothing in excess," shows up as a cultural guideline, and it fits the sleep mood perfectly. The ancient world didn't always follow it. Nobody does, but the aspiration itself is restful. It suggests you can stop pushing so hard. Another calming idea is their fascination with order in nature. The Greeks look at the sky and refuse to accept that it's random decoration. They observe patterns, the path of the sun, the cycle of the moon, the wandering of planets. They begin to describe these movements in ways that shift from omen reading toward explanation. Not fully modern science, but a step toward it. The act of explanation is soothing because it turns mystery into a shape you can hold. And yes, there's mystery too, because Greece is a world of oracles and sacred sites that feel like they were chosen by the land itself. Delphi sits in your imagination like a breath held between mountains, where the air is cooler and the stone looks silver at night. People come with questions, always questions, and they leave with answers that are famously ambiguous, because apparently the divine also enjoys plausible deniability. The comfort isn't in the accuracy of predictions. The comfort is in the ritual of asking. Asking turns anxiety into a formal act. It gives fear a place to sit. You can feel the geography shaping the culture. Mountains divide regions into city-states, each with its own pride and style. The sea connects them, like it connected the Phoenicians and the Minoans. Greece becomes a network of competing and cooperating communities, always negotiating identity. That negotiation produces art, architecture, and thought, because competition can drive refinement when it doesn't turn into constant destruction. It's not always peaceful, but the creative output is undeniable. The Olympic Games appear in the background of this world like a periodic heartbeat. Athletes train for years for a brief moment of performance, and the Games become a shared calendar for the Greek world. There's also the idea, often discussed, sometimes romanticized, of truces associated with the Games. Pauses in conflict so people can travel and compete. Even if reality was complicated, the intention is soothing. A culture trying, at least occasionally, to prioritize shared ritual over endless hostility. Sports themselves hold a calm, repetitive discipline: running, wrestling, throwing. Breath, focus, movement. The same kind of practiced stillness you sensed in Kushite archery. When humans train their bodies, they often calm their minds because the body gives the mind a simple task. Be here, do this. A temple on the Acropolis catches more of your attention as the night deepens. The Parthenon's lines are clean and steady. It's easy to miss how much subtle refinement goes into its appearance. The slight curvature, the optical adjustments meant to make it look perfect to human eyes. That detail is oddly comforting. People cared enough about perception to build in small corrections. They didn't want the world to feel warped. They wanted it to feel right. Feeling right is the entire goal of a bedtime journey like this. The ancient world keeps offering you ways humans tried to make life feel right. Uruk's ledgers, Egypt's rituals, Indus drains, Shang questions, Minoan murals, Hittite treaties, Phoenician letters, Kushite trade and clustered pyramids, Persian roads and gardens. Greece adds something gentle and sharp at the same time. The idea that the mind can be trained to question without collapsing, and that beauty can be measured without becoming cold. Your mind makes a small, sleepy loop back to the earlier weird detail, crocodile dung sunscreen. And it almost makes you smile because it highlights the full spectrum of humanity. On one end, practical problem solving that sounds absurd to modern ears. On the other, philosophy and perfect columns. It's all the same species trying to live, trying to understand, trying to stay comfortable under sun and under stars. Below the Acropolis, the city quiets further. Lamps go out one by one. The symposium winds down as voices soften and then fade. Somewhere a philosopher decides, for once, to stop talking. Somewhere a stonemason's work rests under night air, waiting for daylight. Somewhere a sailor in Piraeus, the harbor, ties a last knot and trusts it. The Greek world sleeps in layers: domestic, civic, sacred, coastal. And beyond Greece, the larger Mediterranean world is shifting. New power centers are rising. A city on the Tiber is learning how to turn roads and law into an engine, borrowing ideas and adapting them with a kind of blunt efficiency that feels almost like the Persian logistics you just left, mixed with Greek public life, mixed with an appetite for permanence that would make even the Egyptians nod. The stone crown of Athens stays behind you as the route moves west, following coastlines and trade winds toward that next vast system. One built on the belief that order can be made out of law, that roads can stitch continents, and that even time itself can be scheduled into something called a calendar. The stone crown of Athens slips behind you, and the route keeps its calm momentum westward, as if the Mediterranean is gently rotating under your feet. The air grows a little less rocky herbal and a little more urban. Smoke from cooking fires, damp from crowded streets, the faint sour sweet of wine spilled long ago and never fully forgiven by the pavement. A new kind of confidence rises ahead, not the philosophical kind that asks questions for sport, but the administrative kind that answers questions with a stamp, a schedule, and a road that insists it will still be there in the morning. Rome appears first as a silhouette of layered hills, then as a pattern of lines, roads, walls, bridges, because this civilization's favorite lullaby is infrastructure. The night is full of quiet movement. A cart rumbles somewhere distant, wheels striking stone in a steady thud-thud that sounds almost like a heartbeat. A guard's sandals scrape across a threshold. A dog decides it must patrol a corner that clearly does not require patrolling, and everyone tolerates it because the dog is part of the neighborhood's security system, and the neighborhood is not above outsourcing. You follow a road into the city, and the road itself feels like a statement. Romans build roads the way other societies build monuments. It's not that they never loved spectacle. They absolutely did. But their deepest genius is a kind of stern practicality dressed in stone. The surface is layered, engineered, drained, designed to handle weather and weight. It's the same calm you felt in Indus drains and Persian relays. Only here it's stretched across a continent like a deliberate grid laid over chaos. Milestones sit along the route like quiet little reminders that distance can be measured, conquered, and made boring. And boring, in the best sense, is the dream. Boring means predictable. Boring means you can plan. Boring means you can rest without feeling like the world will fall off the map while you sleep. The city's soundscape at night is softer than its reputation. In daylight, Rome is noise and commerce and arguments that can turn into theater. At night, it's a layered hush. You pass insulae, apartment buildings, stacked living spaces where families settle into sleep above shops and workshops. You can imagine the faint glow of an oil lamp behind a shutter, someone finishing a small task, folding cloth, checking a ledger, counting coins that never quite feel like enough. Ordinary life persists under imperial scale, and that ordinariness is oddly comforting. An empire doesn't feel so overwhelming when you remember it's mostly people trying to eat dinner and find a place to sit. Ahead, an aqueduct line cuts across the darkness, arches repeating into the distance, a rhythm of stone that your brain immediately wants to follow like a song. The idea itself is soothing. Water traveling from distant hills to a city too dense to depend on wells alone. Water, again, as the spine of comfort. Egypt had the Nile's generosity. Indus cities distributed wells and drains with quiet competence. Persia brought water through cannots like a secret delivered underground. Rome lifts water into the air on arches and carries it where it needs to go, letting gravity do the hard work, because gravity is the one worker who never asks for a raise. You imagine standing under those arches and listening. And if you listen carefully enough, there's a faint, continuous sound. Water moving, steady, and unhurried. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. The point is consistency. A city is calmer when it trusts its water supply. People sleep more deeply when they don't have to wonder if the well will run dry. You drift closer to the heart of the city, and the Forum appears not as a bustling stage, but as a quiet open space holding the memory of countless speeches. In the dark, the columns and temples look like sleeping giants, their outlines softened by night air. This place is built for public life, for law and debate and business, and at this hour it feels like a courtroom after everyone had gone home, still powerful, but no longer demanding attention. Law is one of Rome's great sedatives, not because law is always kind, but because law is a structure. It turns conflict into procedure. It turns I'm angry into here is the process. If Hittite treaties soothed you with written promises between kings, Roman law extends the idea into daily life. Property contracts, citizenship, obligations. Even the messy parts of human behavior get a framework. A framework means fewer surprises. You can sense the Roman mind at work, define the category, specify the rule, enforce the consequence. It's almost elegant in its bluntness. The 12 tables, early and famously foundational, exist as a cultural memory that says the rules are not only whispered among elites. They can be displayed, known, argued. That doesn't make the world fair for everyone. Rome never fully commits to fairness as a universal hobby, but it makes the world legible. Your nervous system likes legible. And the alphabet behind these laws has its own quiet ancestry, like a family tree of symbols traveling across water. Phoenician marks become Greek letters become Etruscan adaptations, and Latin letters settle into the shapes your eyes recognize instantly. A small set of signs crossing centuries and coastlines, becoming the everyday tool of an empire. It's the same portability that made Phoenician writing so contagious, only now it's stamped into public life. Carved into stone, painted on walls, scratched into wax tablets by hands that don't think of it as an invention anymore. It's simply how the world is kept. You pass a small scene in your mind, a clerk in a dim room, writing on a wax tablet with a stylus. The scratching sounds soft and repetitive. It's not epic poetry. It's a list of payments, a note about deliveries, a record of who owes what. Uruk would recognize it instantly and feel oddly proud, like an ancestor watching the family business expand. Concrete enters the story next, because Rome has a special relationship with building materials, specifically the ability to make structures that feel both heavy and daring. Roman concrete, mixed with volcanic ash in many contexts, becomes a quiet miracle. It allows arches, vaults, domes, spaces that open up overhead without needing a forest of columns. It changes what a room can feel like. It changes what a city can attempt. An arch is a very calming shape. It takes weight and redirects it. It doesn't panic. It doesn't resist. It distributes. There's a lesson in that your tired mind can borrow without trying. Pressure doesn't have to crush you if it's guided into a form that can carry it. Romans build pressure-bearing geometry into stone and mortar, and the result is a city that feels engineered to last through weather, time, and human chaos. A dome is the grand version of that calm, an enclosed sky made of stone. Even if you don't picture a specific building, the concept holds, standing beneath a dome at night, hearing your footsteps echo softly, feeling enclosed without feeling trapped. It's the architectural version of a blanket, heavy but protective. And then you arrive at one of Rome's most famously soothing inventions, public baths. Not a tiny private tub in a courtyard, but vast bathing complexes that treat relaxation like civic policy. The idea is almost absurdly modern, a city investing in public spaces where people can wash, exercise, socialize, and unwind. It's not self-care in the way social media sells it. It's infrastructure for the human body and mind. Imagine entering a bath complex in the evening. The air is warm. Steam blurs the edges of the room. Lamps glow through haze. Voices are lower here, softened by echo and humidity. Water splashes gently, not violently. Marble or stone surfaces cool under your fingers where the steam hasn't reached. Somewhere beneath the floor, a hypocaust system moves heat, an underfloor heating method that makes rooms warm from below, like the building itself is breathing warmth upward. Your brain immediately approves of underfloor heating because it's the kind of luxury that doesn't need attention. It simply makes everything better quietly, which is the best kind of improvement. You can almost feel the warmth in your feet as you pass, and your shoulders loosen in response, because bodies understand comfort faster than minds do. The baths also connect back to everything you've seen. Indus drains, but scaled differently. Minoan plumbing in a palace, but made public. Egyptian cleansing in oils, but without needing crocodile dung sunscreen to survive the day. And there's gentle sarcasm in that thought, because humans will engineer hot floors but will still, at some point in history, smear something questionable on their skin because the sun is winning the argument. Outside the baths, the city supply systems keep working even at night. Bread ovens cool slowly. Markets quiet down. Storage rooms hold grain and oil. The empire's belly is always being fed, and feeding an empire requires systems that run on schedules. Rome loves schedules so much it tries to schedule time itself. Calendars matter here. Timekeeping becomes administrative. Days are named, months are counted, festivals set, legal deadlines fixed. Julius Caesar's calendar reform, cleaning up a messy drift of days, becomes part of that same Roman impulse. Align the system with reality, because drifting time makes governance feel unstable. When a calendar matches the seasons, you can plant when you should, harvest when you should, tax when you should. It's not romantic, but it's the backbone of calm. Even night has its devices, sundials and daylight, water clocks and darker hours, the sense that time can be tracked rather than endured. The human mind relaxes when it knows where it is in time. It's the same relief you felt with Shang Star Watchers and Persian couriers. Continuity is the great comfort. The city's grandeur is everywhere if you know how to look without being shouted at. A bridge crossing dark water, repeating arches reflected below. A basilica-like hall holding shadowed space. A temple front with columns catching moonlight. Even a Colosseum, sitting in the distance like a sleeping ring of stone, feels more like a shape than a spectacle at this hour. You don't need the noise. The silhouette is enough to remind you that Rome can gather tens of thousands of people in one place and still make the structure hold. That ability, organizing crowds, building space, managing flow, is the same ability that builds roads and aqueducts and laws. Different expression, same engine. And because Rome is Rome, the empire stretches beyond the city the way a road stretches beyond a milestone. Provinces, governors, legions, trade routes, taxes, citizenship categories, an entire world administered. It can sound heavy, but at night it becomes a quiet pattern. Roads link towns, ships cross seas, letters travel. A postal system of sorts, the cursus publicus, moves official messages with relays that echo the Persian model, because good ideas don't respect borders. Empires borrow what works. You picture a messenger again, riding under stars, passing a milestone, heading toward a station where fresh horses wait. The same calming beat of hooves, the same sealed message, the same feeling that the world is connected enough that silence doesn't mean abandonment. That connection is a psychological gift. Rome also changes the texture of daily objects. Glass becomes more common in certain contexts. Pottery moves in standardized forms. Amphory stamped with marks, traded in bulk. Coins circulate with faces and inscriptions, tiny portable pieces of authority that say, "This is valid because we say it is," and everyone agrees because the alternative is barter arguments forever. A coin is a small peace treaty in metal form. Even books begin to change shape across the broader ancient world, with the codex form, pages bound together, eventually becoming more common than scrolls in many contexts. The idea of flipping through pages feels normal to you, but it's a quiet revolution in how information is handled. Quicker reference, easier storage, more portability. The empire is a machine that likes portability. Portable law, portable currency, portable water and aqueduct channels, portable identity in citizenship records. And yet, mystery persists because the ancient world always keeps something back. How exactly did certain concrete mixes achieve such durability in specific environments? Why do some structures outlast expectations while others crumble? What did an ordinary person truly feel walking these streets when the empire was at its height? Pride, boredom, resentment, security, all of the above in the same afternoon. Official inscriptions don't record private sighs. Stone keeps declarations more readily than it keeps doubts. In the quiet hours, those doubts become softer. A person in a small apartment listens to distant footsteps and feels safe because the street is lit and the guards are routine. Another person worries about rent and grain prices because empires don't erase economics. Someone else falls asleep after the baths, skin warm, mind loose, grateful for a system that, whatever its flaws, still delivered water, heat, and a place to sit. The empire's edges blur into the larger world again. Roads run east as well as west. Trade doesn't stop at borders. Beyond Roman provinces, caravans move across steppe and desert, carrying silk and spices and stones, carrying stories and small inventions. The Mediterranean is one half of a conversation. The other half is Asia's vast interior routes, where a different kind of administrative brilliance is waiting. One that will turn paper into power and turn a capital into a hub that feels like the center of 1,000 roads. The last Roman image that stays with you is simple: an aqueduct arch under stars, water moving invisibly at the top, steady as breath, while below it a road continues into darkness without fear. That aqueduct arch stays above you, like a quiet stone bridge between worlds, water sliding unseen along its top, while the road below keeps stretching forward with that Roman confidence that everything can be measured, scheduled, and filed. The road runs out of the Mediterranean night and into a broader darkness where the land opens up, where caravans replace legions, and where the sound of movement changes from wheels on stone to hooves and soft bells on leather harnesses. The air grows drier again, but in a different way than Anatolia or Nubia. This dryness feels continental, wide, patient. You can almost taste dust that has traveled. Somewhere far ahead, a city's lamplight glows like a cluster of low stars, and you realize the calm you've been collecting: drains, roads, treaties, letters, water channels, is about to meet a civilization that takes administration and turns it into an art form so refined it starts inventing tools specifically for paperwork. You follow the Silk Road, not as a single line, but as a braided set of routes, because deserts and mountains rarely allow one neat path. The phrase Silk Road makes it sound like a paved boulevard lined with boutiques, which is adorable. In reality, it's networks, oases, passes, river valleys, caravan stations, and a steady human ability to keep going because stopping is worse. The soothing part is the rhythm. Caravan travel is repetitive by necessity. Pack, walk, rest, water, count, repair, repeat. Your mind can sink into that repetition like it sank into Roman arches and Persian relay stations. Ahead, the world gathers itself into a capital that feels planned, not accidental. Chang'an, often associated with the Han and later dynasties, rests like a grid of intention, a city designed to hold power without needing to shout. If Athens felt like a conversation that grew into streets, Chang'an feels like someone wrote a blueprint and then insisted the blueprint be respected. The layout is orderly, districts defined, gates controlled, avenues wide enough to make movement predictable. Predictable movement is calming movement. The city at night has layers. There's the quiet of official compounds where the lamps are fewer, where guards patrol with the bored competence of people who have done the same route 1,000 times. There's the domestic quiet in courtyards where families settle, shutters close, and the last sounds are bowls rinsed and set aside. And then there's the trade quiet, never fully silent, because a hub city doesn't sleep as deeply as a village. Somewhere in an inn, merchants speak in low voices about prices and routes, about which pass is safer, which official is easier, which warehouse can be trusted not to lose a crate overnight. Trust keeps showing up as the real treasure. The Phoenicians carried it in letters. The Hittites hammered it into treaties. Rome poured into roads and law. Here, trust becomes something that can be organized across enormous distances, and the trick is the same one you've seen before: make the world readable. The first thing you notice is the bureaucracy, because it's everywhere in the background like a steady heartbeat. Officials, clerks, scribes, records of households, taxes, labor obligations, grain storage, military service. A state doesn't become stable by wishing. It becomes stable by writing things down and then acting like the writing matters. If you've ever made a plan and then ignored it, you know exactly why ancient governments didn't rely on vibes. The writing itself carries a different kind of calm than alphabets. Chinese characters aren't designed to be a tiny set of sound symbols. They're a system that can represent meaning in a way that survives dialect differences across a vast region. That's a superpower for administration. A courier can deliver a document, and officials in different areas can read it even if they speak differently. It's the empire's way of saying, communication will not be held hostage by geography. You can picture a clerk at a low desk, lamplight steady, brush poised. Brushwork is slow in a way that feels almost like breathing. Ink doesn't like panic. Ink likes control. The brush touches paper, or earlier, bamboo slips tied together, or silk for special documents. And the characters appear in strokes that have order. Downstroke, turn, lift, continue. It's not just writing, it's a practice discipline. The body learns the characters the way a dancer learns steps. That physicality makes it relaxing to imagine. Your mind can follow the stroke sequence and settle. Bamboo slips have their own calming sound. Small pieces clicking softly as they're handled, tied with cord, stacked in bundles. They're durable, but heavy, and weight matters when you're trying to run a government at scale. Which brings you to one of the most sleep-friendly inventions in human history, paper. Paper doesn't arrive as a dramatic lightning bolt. It arrives as refinement. People experiment with fibers, pulping, pressing, drying, smoothing. Under the Han, figures like Kai Luan are traditionally credited with improvements that make paper more practical and widely usable. The important part isn't the name, it's the shift in the feeling of administration. Information becomes lighter. Archives become larger without becoming impossible to carry. The empire's memory stops being limited by the weight of bamboo. You can imagine the texture of early paper in your hands, slightly rough, absorbent, alive with fibers. It's humble, and that humility is the point. Clay tablets feel permanent but heavy. Papyrus is lighter but depends on a particular plant. Parchment depends on animal skins and labor. Paper can be made from many plant sources. Once a society masters it, the door opens. More notes, more records, more letters, more books, more learning moving through more hands. The calm here is obvious. When information can move easily, uncertainty shrinks. The state can respond faster. Merchants can coordinate better. Families can keep records. A person can write a thought and not lose it. Even your modern brain knows the comfort of putting something on paper to stop carrying it in your head. Ancient people discovered that too, and you can almost feel their relief. The imperial postal and courier systems take on a new crispness in this world. Relay stations exist, horses are managed, routes are maintained. The Persian network echoes here again, because good logistics is the closest thing humans have ever created to magic. A message leaving a frontier garrison can reach a capital in time to matter. That changes everything. The empire becomes a body with nerves that actually conduct signals rather than just hoping someone eventually hears a rumor. And the frontier matters because the Han world faces vast steppe regions where mobility is a different kind of power. Fast horse cultures moving across grasslands with an ease that settled farmers can't replicate. The border becomes a zone of negotiation. Walls, forts, watchtowers, trade posts, diplomacy, conflict, and long stretches of waiting. The Great Wall, in reality, is not one single clean line built in one moment. It's an evolving system across centuries, sections built, repaired, extended, and sometimes abandoned. The soothing thought is that even walls are maintenance projects. Nothing stays finished. Civilizations aren't static monuments. They're ongoing repairs. At night, a watchtower on the frontier feels like a small island of light in a sea of dark. A guard listens to wind. The sky is crowded with stars, and the open land beyond the wall looks endless. If danger comes, signal fires can be lit, beacons passing warnings across distance. Signal systems are another form of making the world readable. Light becomes language. The night becomes less frightening when it can carry information. Trade keeps flowing across these borders because even rivals rarely resist profit. Silk travels westward, and the idea of silk is almost too perfect for sleep. Fabric that feels like water but stays cloth, smooth enough to slide across skin, light enough to move with breath. The secret of sericulture, raising silkworms, harvesting cocoons, reeling thread, is a whole miniature civilization of patience. Mulberry leaves gathered, worms fed, cocoons collected, threads unwound, looms working in steady rhythm. The process is repetitive and delicate. It rewards calm hands and steady attention. You can picture a weaver at night, working by lamplight, the loom making soft wooden sounds. The shuttle moves back and forth like a pendulum. The cloth grows line by line. It's the opposite of rushing. It's civilization as slow craft. Silk becomes currency of prestige. It moves as trade good, gift, and diplomatic tool. It also becomes one of the reasons routes stay active. But it's never only silk. Horses move too. High-quality horses from Central Asia valued by Chinese states for cavalry. Spices, precious stones, glassware, and ideas. Buddhism begins traveling along these routes in later periods, carried by monks and merchants, changing spiritual landscapes. Even before that, the Silk Road is already doing what roads always do, mixing worlds. Chang'an becomes a place where that mixing is visible. Foreign envoys arrive. Traders speak languages that sound unfamiliar under the city gates. Goods appear in markets that weren't local yesterday. You can smell unfamiliar spices. You can see unusual textiles. You can hear music with instruments that didn't originate in the same valley. The city absorbs and organizes this variety because that's what strong hubs do. They don't panic when new things arrive. They assign them a place. The market districts have their own controlled energy. Even if the official rules say markets close at certain hours, a big city always has quiet late activity. Someone unloading a cart, someone settling a debt, someone whispering about a shipment that arrived early. The lamps in a market aren't bright, they're practical. Light falls on baskets, jars, bolts of cloth. A merchant's hands move confidently over goods, weighing them, testing them. Trust is again built through touch, weight, and repeatable measures. Measures matter here. Standardization is a calming force because it reduces argument. If the length unit is defined, if the weight unit is defined, if coins and taxes and rations can be measured consistently, then the mind has fewer reasons to stay alert. The state's obsession with standards is, at its best, the obsession with making daily life predictable. Even a calendar feels more precise in this world. Astronomical observation isn't only curiosity, it's governance. Seasonal timing matters for agriculture. Ritual timing matters for legitimacy. Eclipses, comets, unusual phenomena can be treated as messages, yes, but they also push officials to observe carefully. In China, records of celestial events become remarkably detailed across long spans, partly because the sky is considered tied to the state's moral order, and partly because once you start observing, you keep observing. The soothing part is the long continuity. Humans watching the same sky, night after night, writing down what they see, building a memory larger than a single lifetime. In a quiet observatory setting, you can imagine a scholar official looking up, then down, then up again, noting the position of a star relative to a known marker. The motion is slow. The tools are simple compared to modern telescopes, but the discipline is real. The body stays still. The mind focuses. The act itself feels like meditation with paperwork. And because we're talking about ancient Chinese ingenuity, your mind can't help drifting past a few inventions that feel almost like gifts to later humans. The wheelbarrow, for instance, moving heavy loads with less strain. It's so simple, it almost looks obvious, which is how the best tools always look after they exist. or the seismograph attributed to Zhang Heng in the Han era, an apparatus meant to detect distant earthquakes through mechanical sensitivity. You don't need the full technical diagram. You only need the idea, a device that listens to the Earth's movement, even when people can't feel it locally, then signals the direction. That's astonishingly soothing in a strange way. The world shakes, but the state wants to know, wants to respond, wants to help. Disaster becomes detectable. Uncertainty becomes information. Information, again, is the theme that keeps tucking you in. The social structure around learning adds another layer of calm. The ideal of the educated official, trained in texts and ethics, becomes a cultural anchor. Even when real politics is messy, the ideal matters. It says governance should be thoughtful. It says power should at least pretend to be civilized. That pretense isn't nothing. Pretense shapes behavior over time. If a ruler wants to be seen as legitimate, they have to align with expected norms: ritual, administration, justice. Norms, when stable, create predictability. Predictability helps people sleep. In a quiet study room, you can picture a young scholar reading by lamplight, repeating lines, practicing brushstrokes, preparing for a career that depends on knowledge and composure. That scene has the same calm discipline as the weaver at the loom and the courier on the road. Civilization keeps returning to the same calming virtues: patience, repetition, record-keeping, maintenance. In the city itself, Chang'an as an idea, as a planned capital, feels like the physical embodiment of those virtues. Gates open and close on schedule. Districts have functions. Markets are regulated. Roads align. Water is managed. Gardens exist here too, though in different styles than Persian enclosed paradise, still shaped spaces where nature is guided into comfort. The result is a sense that the state is large but not purely chaotic. Large but legible. Your mind makes a soft, almost amused comparison. Rome built arches for water. China built paper for words. Both are ways of carrying essentials across distance. Water for the body, information for the body politic. Both steady, both invisible when they work, both noticed only when they fail. And somewhere on the edge of this vast system, a caravan pauses at an oasis. The animals settle. The humans eat quietly. Someone checks a bundle of silk and reties the cord. Someone smooths a paper document as if it's as valuable as the cargo, because in many ways it is. Above them, the same stars that guided Phoenician sailors and Shang observers and Greek thinkers keep their patient pattern. The route ahead begins to curve again, not only across land, but across oceans and jungles, towards civilizations that learned to read the sky with calendars carved into stone, that built cities and green landscapes where the night is thick with insects and the air smells like rain, and where time itself becomes a temple you can walk through. The caravan's oasis quiet stays with you like a cool cloth on the forehead. Animals settling, cords being retied, paper smoothed carefully as if it were silk itself. Then the air changes in a way you can almost hear. Dryness gives way to humidity. Dust becomes damp soil. The night stops feeling crisp and starts feeling alive, thick with tiny sounds. Insects, distant frogs, leaves shifting as if the trees are breathing together. The scent is green, wet, and sweet in places like fruit ripening somewhere you can't see. You're moving into the worlds that grew in rain and forest, where the sky is sometimes hidden by canopy and sometimes revealed in startling clarity when clouds break. Mesoamerica rises in your imagination not as one single civilization, but as layers of time. Olmec foundations, Maya brilliance, Teotihuacan's vast urban grid, later Mexica power, each building on the same ancient habit. Measure time, align life to it, make the heavens readable so the earth feels less unpredictable. The first calm fact here is that the Maya didn't just look at the sky. They treated it like a clock with personalities. They tracked cycles, solar, lunar, planetary, with devotion that feels almost tender. Their calendars aren't a single calendar. They're systems, a sacred count, a solar count, and the longer frameworks that let them mark huge spans of time. This isn't obsession for obsession's sake. It's comfort. If you can say where you are in time with precision, you can feel anchored. If you can predict seasons, you can plant. If you can coordinate rituals, you can gather a community. If you can name the day, you can name the world. You imagine a temple platform rising above the jungle canopy, stone steps cooling after sunset. Up here the air moves more freely, and the sky opens like a dark bowl filled with stars. The priest-astronomer figure in your mind doesn't look frantic or mystical. They look focused, patient, like a person who understands that the sky will be here tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. They watch the horizon line for the first hint of a rising point, tracking where the sun appears across the year, marking solstices and equinoxes with architecture that becomes a permanent memory. Buildings become instruments. That idea, architecture as instrument, is one of the most soothing things you can carry into sleep. A wall that makes light fall in a certain way on a certain day. A corridor that frames a sunrise. A platform aligned with a celestial event. These are calendars you can walk through. They make time feel touchable. The jungle below holds the city, and the city holds a surprising order. Stone causeways, raised roads called sakbiab in Maya contexts, connect temples and plazas, lifting movement above muddy ground in rainy seasons. They're pale in moonlight, almost glowing, like quiet ribbons across the landscape. Roads again. Every civilization that wants to last eventually builds roads, because roads are how you tell the future you'll be able to get here. In the plaza, the night is cooler than the forest because open spaces breathe. Buildings stand around the square like patient guardians. The acoustics can be strange and powerful. Voices carry, echoes bounce. A small sound can travel far, which means gatherings become intimate even in large spaces. The city feels designed for ceremony, yes, but also for community. Markets, meetings, games, rituals, all held inside the same stone geometry. Stone itself is a different kind of permanence here. In river valleys, you had mud brick repaired each season. In Rome, you had concrete and arches. Here, limestone is cut and stacked, plastered and painted. The paint is often lost to time, which is unfair because these cities were not always stone gray. They were bright. Reds, blues, whites, colors that would have stood out against green jungle like deliberate fire. Even at night, you can sense that hidden brightness under the moonlit surfaces. And then the writing appears, carved and painted in glyphs that feel like little pictures holding language inside them. Maya writing is complex and beautiful, combining logograms and syllabic signs. It's not designed for speed and trade the way Phoenician letters were. It's designed to hold names, events, dynastic memory, ritual dates. It's writing that treats time as sacred. Stele, stone monuments, stand like vertical archives in plazas, recording rulers and dates in a way that makes history public and permanent. The stela doesn't whisper. It stands. It says this happened. This person mattered. This day had a name. There's something calming about stele at night. You can walk past one and run your fingers across carved grooves, feeling the texture of information. You don't have to decode every sign. You can simply feel the intention, memory made into stone so the future can't erase it easily. Time, though, is the real monument here. The long count system, used to track large spans, gives the Maya a way to locate themselves in cycles far beyond a single lifetime. That kind of thinking can feel dizzying, but in the sleepy context it becomes comforting. If a civilization can calmly count time in such vast measures, then your own day, your own worries becomes a very small thing. Smallness can be relief. The universe is large enough to hold your stress without collapsing. And the mystery deepens because the Maya also love the planet Venus in a way that feels almost like a relationship. Venus appears as a brilliant morning star or evening star, and its cycle becomes tied to scheduling and symbolism. Observations become predictions. Predictions become ritual planning. The sky becomes an agenda. You can imagine someone waiting for Venus to appear, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a known pattern returning, like a friend showing up exactly when expected. The famous ball game appears in the background of the city's life. A stone court with slanted walls. The game is athletic, ceremonial, social, and symbolic all at once. Modern people sometimes fixate on the dramatic interpretations tied to sacrifice because modern media loves drama. But the soothing core is simpler, a public sport that structures time, that gives people something to train for, watch, argue about, celebrate. You already saw how Greek athletics and festivals created shared calendars. Here, the ball game serves a similar function, rhythm and identity. Communities breathe together when they gather for repeated events. The agricultural base is also quietly brilliant. In different Maya regions, people adapt to wetlands and hills using raised fields, terraces, water management, and careful planting cycles. Again, the calm is an adaptation. A civilization isn't only temples. It's farming strategies that keep people fed in challenging environments. The jungle looks abundant, but abundance can be deceptive. Soil can be thin. Rain can be too much or too little. Stability requires skill. Skill shows up in everyday art too. Pottery painted with scenes and patterns. Jade carved into smooth pieces that feel cool to touch. Textiles woven with care. Jade especially carries a kind of calm aura. Green stone polished until it looks like captured water. Holding jade would feel like holding a cool night in your palm. That's the kind of object humans make when they want permanence to feel gentle. You drift north and west in your imagination and find another city that changes the mood. Teotihuacan. Even the name carries a sense of later awe, because by the time later peoples encountered its ruins, it already felt ancient to them. That's one of the most soothing layers of ancient history. Civilizations looking at earlier civilizations and feeling the same wonder you feel. The past has its own past. Teotihuacan is different from Maya's city-states in flavor. It feels like a planned megacity, straight avenues, aligned grids, massive monumental complexes. The Avenue of the Dead stretches like a stone spine through the city, connecting great structures in a way that makes movement feel ceremonial even when it's just walking. The Pyramid of the Sun rises in a shape that feels both simple and overwhelming, like a mountain decided to become architecture. At night, the avenue would be haunting in the most peaceful sense. Broad, open, quiet. Stone underfoot. Structures looming as silhouettes. The sky huge above, and the city's geometry making you feel like you're inside a cosmic diagram. Again, architecture as instrument. The whole city feels aligned to something, sky, direction, order. Whether every alignment is perfectly understood today doesn't matter for this mood. The intention matters. Humans wanted to make the city match the universe's pattern. And then you remember what you've been collecting all along, legibility. Teotihuacan's grid is legibility turned into stone. Rome made legibility in roads and law. Persia made legibility in satrapies and relays. China made legibility in paper and characters. Mesoamerica makes legibility in calendars and aligned avenues. Different tools, same calming aim. The most mysterious part is how much remains unknown. Teotihuacan's original language isn't clearly identified. The identities of its rulers are less explicit than in Maya inscriptions. Its collapse and transformations are complex. Mystery again becomes a soft pillow rather than a problem. The city doesn't explain itself fully, so your imagination can move through it without being forced into a single storyline. It remains spacious, like the night sky. You can sense later civilizations building on these foundations. The Mexica, often called Aztecs, later developed their own powerful urban center at Tenochtitlan, with canals and causeways that make it feel like a shimmering city on water. You already know how calming water city planning can be from the Indus Great Bath and from Persian gardens. Here, a lake city becomes its own kind of wonder, with chinampas, raised agricultural plots, turning water into farmland, turning a lake into a pantry. That's one of the most quietly genius solutions humans have ever created. Farms that float, fields that breathe water instead of fighting it. At night, a canal city would be all reflections. Lamps and moonlight mirrored in dark water. Canoes gliding quietly. The sound of paddles dipping and lifting, steady as breath. It's easy to see why such a place would feel like a dream, even while it was real. The calendar returns again in these later contexts too: ritual cycles, solar cycles, sacred counts. Time is always the central character in Mesoamerica. Time is what gets named, celebrated, feared, and honored. The sense of cycles can be heavy if you focus on the more intense aspects of ritual life. But in the sleep mood, you focus on the gentler truth. These societies watched the sky carefully, built calendars to match it, and used those calendars to hold communities together. You stand in your imagination at the top of a pyramid platform in the deep night. Jungle sounds below, a plaza spread out beneath, a line of causeway glowing pale, stars overhead, somewhere far away, a volcano silhouette against the sky. The world feels ancient and alive, and the magnificence is not loud. It's the feeling of humans carving order into time itself, aligning stone to the sun's return, teaching generations to recognize patterns in the heavens so the earth feels safer. Your mind loops back to an earlier image, Shang bone cracks answering a question. Here, the sky answers through repetition. Venus returns. The sun returns. The calendar turns. The reassurance is built into the cosmos. And beyond this jungle and these aligned avenues, the night begins to tilt toward the last great stretch of your journey, toward a place where rivers and monsoons and stone temples combine, where cities rise and fall with tides and trade winds, and where the idea of sacred order becomes architecture you can hear, smell, and almost taste in incense and wet stone. The insects keep singing as the scene shifts, their sound smoothing the transition like a blanket being pulled up a little higher. The insects keep singing as the jungle air carries you onward, and the wet green darkness loosens into warmer space, shaped by rivers that don't simply run. They arrive in seasons. The ground smells like rain, even on nights that stay dry. The wind shifts with a slow confidence, because monsoon winds keep their own calendar and they never ask permission. Coastlines matter again, not as edges, but as invitations. The Indian Ocean isn't an impossible barrier. It's a pattern system. Sailors learn those patterns the way Persian couriers learned relay stations and the Maya learned Venus. For part of the year, the winds push one direction, then the breath of the sea reverses, and that reversal becomes a schedule written in air. You wait, you depart, you arrive, you wait again. Entire port cities grow around that patience, because the most profitable thing on Earth is still predictability. That seasonal trust creates a maritime web that feels quietly enormous. Harbor lights cluster like low constellations. Goods move so routinely that wonder becomes background noise. Peppercorns, aromatic resins for incense, cotton cloth, beads, metals, and polished stones. Trade stitches distant lives together with ordinary desires. Spices don't care about politics. Cloth doesn't pick sides. A ship's hold is a simple argument that strangers can cooperate when everyone agrees that eating and earning are good ideas. You drift inland along a river swollen from recent rain, and the night feels heavy with water even when the sky is clear. Stone steps appear, descending into the earth, and the geometry makes you pause. This isn't a casual well dug wherever someone got thirsty. It's a step well, deep, terraced, deliberately built so people can walk down toward water as the level rises and falls through hard dry seasons and generous wet ones. In lamplight, the steps repeat in crisp patterns, and your mind likes the repetition immediately. Each landing is a pause. Each descent is calmer than the last, because the deeper you go, the cooler it gets. The air becomes softer. Sound changes. Footsteps echo in a gentle, disciplined way that makes every movement feel intentional. Above, the night is warm and thick. Down here, stone holds coolness like a secret, and water waits with the same patience it has shown everywhere tonight. Indus drains, Persian canons, Roman aqueducts, water-guided, stored, protected, respected. A stepwell is a lesson in humility. The builders didn't assume water would always be high. They didn't assume drought wouldn't come. They built for the water's moods and made those moods livable. If your own life has felt like it's been switching seasons without warning, this is the ancient answer. Stop wasting energy arguing with fluctuation. Build something that still works when the level drops. Back on the surface, temple silhouettes rise against the sky that looks darker because humidity drinks light. These temples speak a different architectural language than Greek columns or Roman arches. They feel like mountains made of carving, layered towers, repeating motifs, stone persuaded into lace. Relief work gathers along walls and door frames. Animals, flowers, dancers, guardians, stories stacked in bands so the eye can wander without getting lost. Stone is the medium, but the effect is surprisingly soft. A lamp burns with ghee somewhere nearby. The flame is small, steady, stubborn in the way good lamplight always is. The smell is warm and faintly sweet. Incense threads through it, rounded rather than sharp, as if the air itself is being soothed. Devotion here often lives inside daily motion. People don't always split life into ordinary and sacred with a hard line. They carry it the way you carry a rhythm in breathing, present, repeated, familiar, not demanding applause. Quiet practice is where the biggest ideas hide. Mathematics is one of them. Over long centuries, place value and a symbol for zero become refined into a system that makes numbers behave. It's almost funny, gently funny, that one of humanity's most world-changing inventions looks like a small circle that does nothing by itself. Zero just sits there. Zero doesn't brag. Zero doesn't demand attention. Zero changes everything anyway. Place value turns calculation into something clean and scalable. It makes accounting easier, astronomy more precise, engineering more reliable. It's writing again, but for quantity, another method of making reality readable so the mind can stop wrestling with it. You can almost feel the relief in that. A complicated sum becoming a neat sequence, confusion becoming a method. Astronomy keeps the thread running. You've met sky watchers already, Shang diviners, Greek observers, Maya calendar keepers. Here, observation becomes both practical and philosophical. Lunar months, solar seasons, planetary motions, eclipses, these shape calendars, agriculture, ritual timing, navigation. Predicting an eclipse turns it from a frightening surprise into a scheduled event. Predictability doesn't erase awe, it makes awe safer, like watching lightning from inside a well-built house. There's another calm science here, too. The body treated as a system that can be balanced rather than a machine that only matters when it breaks. Traditions of health and routine emphasize maintenance, sleep, food, herbs, massage, breath, environment, habit. It's the same theme you've seen everywhere. The unglamorous work that keeps a civilization from wobbling. Indus drains prevented sickness. Roman waterworks kept cities alive. A well-kept routine does something similar for a single human body, quietly turning chaos into something manageable. Practices of attention, meditation, breath discipline fit into that maintenance mindset. They begin as experiments in where the mind can rest. You can't always control rain, rulers, markets, or the occasional genius who decides crocodile dung sunscreen sounds like self-care. You can sometimes choose what you amplify inside your own head. The practice is quiet enough to feel almost boring, and boring, in the best sense, is what lets the nervous system unclench. The coast returns. Ports glow in the dark like settled constellations. Ships wait for the right season the way farmers wait for the right rain. Sailors watch the sky with patient concentration because the wind is both clock and road. When the season turns, hulls slide into water, ropes loosen, sails rise, and a whole city's worth of cargo begins to move. Across these waters, cultures exchange more than goods. Stories travel. Religious ideas travel. Artistic motifs travel. A pattern carved on one shoreline appears again on another, slightly changed, as if the ocean itself edits. Scripts adapt. Loanwords slip into languages and stay. The movement is a quiet magnificence that doesn't require conquest. It requires curiosity, patience, and trust that the horizon leads somewhere that understands hunger, trade, and the need for shelter. Then Southeast Asia gathers the maritime energy into a wonder made of water and stone. A city appears not merely as streets, but as an engineered landscape where reservoirs and canals spread like veins. In a Khmer world, Angkor becomes proof that temples are only half the story. The other half is water management, storing monsoon water, distributing it, guiding it, making agriculture steadier and the city more resilient. Hydraulic logic becomes sacred architecture. Temple mountains rise like stone versions of holy peaks, surrounded by moats that mirror the sky. Water and stone collaborate. Reflections at night feel unreal. Towers inverted in still dark water, stars doubled, the world appearing deeper than it is. Water turns light into an echo, and your mind follows the echo instead of chasing thoughts. Angkor, what under moonlight feels less like a monument and more like a living structure that happens to be made of sandstone. The stone holds the day's warmth, then cools slowly. Corridors swallow sound and return it as a gentle murmur. Relief carvings run along walls in long narrative bands. Processions, dancers, scenes that repeat with variations so the eye can drift without needing to arrive anywhere. Detail after detail, the stone insists on one message. Time passes, but craft can outlast a lifetime. Across the sea, another stone mountain rises in a different form, built as a path you can walk rather than a tower you stare at. Borobudur sits like a quiet hill of carved stone, its terraces arranged so ascent becomes a slow story. In the dark it would feel even calmer, the reliefs wrapping around like a patient thought, the empty spaces under stupas holding stillness as if stillness were something you could store. Rain starts nearby, not a sudden slap, more a steady hush. The sound spreads across leaves like thousands of tiny fingertips. A channel carries water away calmly, because builders expected this. They didn't build against rain, they built with it. You've seen the same wisdom everywhere tonight. Don't fight the environment, translate it into structure. That translation is the thread tying the whole journey together. Uruk translated harvest into tablets. Egypt translated flood into ritual and stone. The Indus translated hygiene into grids and drains. Shang translated uncertainty into questions carved into bone. Phoenicians translated speech into portable letters. Rome translated movement into roads and water into arches. The Maya translated the sky into calendars you could live inside. Here, monsoon winds become a schedule, and stone steps become a reservoir you can walk into. Comfort lives in that repetition. Different climates, different languages, different gods, same human impulse. Make life predictable enough that a person can lie down at night and unclench. A final image settles into place. The cool descent of the stepwell, the slow rise of the temple tower into humid starlight, and beyond both of them, a sea waiting patiently for the season to turn. Somewhere far away, Phoenician purple cloth absorbs lamplight like deep water. Somewhere behind a wall, a Persian garden channel whispers. Somewhere on a road, a Roman milestone stands bored and reliable. Somewhere in a plaza, a Maya date still sits in stone, calmly sure of itself. Even that ridiculous crocodile dung sunscreen shows up in your memory, like an inside joke that refuses to retire. And it feels harmless here because everything feels a little softer now. The pacing slows without effort. Details stop insisting on being examined. They soften around the edges the way rain turns into mist, the way reflections stretch on water, the way ink settles into paper fibers. Your shoulders loosen. The feeling of distance becomes gentle because every road you traveled, river, sea, caravan trail, imperial highway, was always leading toward the same place, a quieter mind. The night holds you without asking for anything back. Stone cools. Water gathers. Wind turns, patient in its own slow calendar. Your breath becomes the easiest rhythm in the room, the simplest pattern you can trust, and it feels good to let that be enough. Thoughts don't need solving. They can sit like boats at anchor, tied loosely, rising and falling with small waves, never needing to leave the harbor. The world beyond your eyelids continues its ancient habits, rivers flowing, roads stretching, calendars turning, while you are allowed to do the most human thing of all, stop working. Your eyelids grow heavier in a simple, ordinary way, like curtains that finally agree to close. The muscles around your eyes soften. Your jaw loosens. The small effort of holding your face together all day quietly ends. Breath comes and goes without needing to be managed, and each exhale feels like the body returning borrowed tension to the dark. If a thought tries to reappear, it can pass through like a cool draft and keep moving. Nothing needs to be captured. Nothing needs to be finished. The night is wide enough to hold unfinished things without complaint, and you are allowed to put them down. The last shapes fade into calm darkness. A temple tower becomes a silhouette, then becomes only the idea of a silhouette, and then becomes nothing at all. Rain thins into quiet. The sea horizon dissolves. The stepwell's cool air becomes a memory of cool air, and even that memory drifts off, gentle and unforced, like a page closing on its own.